it's Amanda, and welcome back to the history of FMW, where we are on episode 40, and we will be going over the year 2012. Brett, can you start us off by summarizing 2011 for everybody?
So 2011 was very similar to 2010, where there are some great moments and some great matches, but overall it was a down year across the board in the Japanese independent scene. You have Freedoms. They are really struggling to find their identity. They don't want to be a deathmatch promotion completely. They don't want every show to just have death matches. They don't want to be Big Japan Light because they can't compete with Big Japan. But every time they run a non-deathmatch show, it doesn't do that well. It only draws about half a Shinkiba, whereas a deathmatch show, they can sell out Shinkiba or they can run Corgan and do a decent number. So they're really kind of struggling to find out who they are going into 2012. And then you have the restart of the Apache Army with Kanemura and Kuroda as the focal points of this new promotion. They ran every month in Shinkiba, but didn't do very well. They have a small, loyal fan base that are coming to the shows, but overall they're losing money as a result. And at the end of 2011, they came up with a new angle to create a new heel group, the Apache Demolition, to fight the Apache Army. So you have Kanemura and Kuroda as the baby faces going up against this heel group with Tomohiko Hashimoto and some other of his allies squaring off with one another. So there is direction with the promotion. It's just not catching any interest or sparking new fans to come to see this promotion. And then you have Nanjo Hayato, who was feeling nostalgic towards FMW, the promotion that he grew up in, and he wanted to restart up a new FMW-like promotion based out of Osaka in 2011, where, you know, he'd bring in Onita, he'd bring in Megumi Kudo, Hayabusa, Kanemura, a bunch of the old FMW wrestlers to have a no-rope barbed wire death match and have all these FMW guys mixed in with the Osaka wrestlers that he's friends with currently. And so he runs a big show in August, and it does not do well at all. And then he almost pretty much scraps the whole FMW idea from the promotion, gives it one more shot with him taking on Masato Tanaka in a singles match in November, and that show does not do very well at all. As well, and so Nanjo just completely gives up on the whole FMW nostalgia aspect of his promotion, and going into 2012, his promotion has nothing to do with FMW. No FMW wrestlers are going to take part in it anymore, and he is just completely going to run his own independent promotion out of Osaka with nothing to do, feeling that, okay, I tried the FMW nostalgia aspect, it lost me money, I'm done with it. And somewhat similar to Tarzan Goto running his Super FMW shows back in 2010, where, it just, the nostalgia and just overall the show's not being very well, did not do well. The Nanjo at least ran a pretty decent show, nothing compared to the embarrassment that Tarzan Goto had done the year prior, as it looks like in 2012, FMW nostalgia is a money loser. As we'll go over in this episode, FMW nostalgia is definitely not dead, it just needs to be modernized to draw money.
Riki Fuji would start the year announcing that he was going to be joining the Kaientai Dojo promotion. Can you go over the details why and what happened as a result?
So Riki had been contacted by Taka Michinoku at the end of 2011 about joining the Kaientai Dojo promotion, and Riki would end up deciding that joining Kaientai Dojo would be a better career move for him. So him and Taka hold a press conference to announce that starting in January, Riki's going to be an official Kaientai Dojo member. Riki had previously been working for Freedoms, and Freedoms was only booking him mostly once a month for their Shinkiba shows, and Riki felt this was a better move because Kaientai Dojo will have shows and offer Riki bookings pretty much every weekend. And also, Kaientai Dojo is located in Chiba, and that's where Riki's from, so it's going to be a lot shorter drive or shorter distance to be able to make the show. So Riki feels like this is going to be a better move, and also he gets to still work for other promotions if he wants to, outside bookings, and Riki felt like he was going to still get to work for Freedoms, and that would not turn out to be true because after February, Riki would end up just stop getting booked by Takashi Sasaki. He just wouldn't hear from him anymore. Eventually, Riki would end up getting contacted by Jun Kasai to work his Corrigan Hall show in August, and after that, pretty much Riki is just done with Freedoms. I think he only worked one more show when they ran a Chiba show years later. So essentially, Riki is now going to be out of Freedoms after February, and he's going to be a full-time Kaientai Dojo wrestler.
Freedoms would begin the year on January 9th at Shinkiba with the WEW Hardcore Tag Team title main event. Can you talk about this match?
So they would announce a crowd of 212 fans for this show, which is a good number overall, especially compared to what they were doing at the end of last year for a non-deathmatch show. The main event of the show is going to be Mammoth Sasaki and Kamui defending their WEW Hardcore Tag Team titles against the Brahmin Brothers. Kamui, he would end up setting up one of the Brahmin Brothers on a board stacked on a set of chairs on the outside, but as he would go to the top rope, the other Brahmin Brother would come over and smash him over the head with a street sign. Kamui would eventually end up trying again to set up the board on the apron, and this time successfully slam Brahmin Shu through that board. At the same time, Brahmin Ki is getting picked up by Mammoth Sasaki on the ramp of Shinkiba, and Mammoth is hitting a running powerbomb, sending him into the ring, and then Mammoth and Kamui, they would end up hitting a double Mammoth home run on Ki, but as Mammoth would go to choke slam Ki on a stack of chairs, Brahmin Shu would rush in and spit Indian ink in Mammoth's face, and then both Brahmin Brothers, they would end up trying to hit Kamui with a barbed wire bat, but Kamui would end up moving out of the way, and they would end up hitting each other instead, and then Kamui would then end up wrapping a chain around Ki and throw him over the top to try and hang him, but Shu would throw powder in Kamui's face, and then end up hitting a fireman's carry on Kamui on the barbed wire bat for the win. So the Brahmin Brothers get the win and win the WEW Hardcore Tag Team titles. And this is a pretty good match. It's kind of the basic hardcore stuff, but it's a fun match and a good way to start 2012 off for Freedoms.
Freedoms would then run on February 5th in Yokohama and on February 11th in Osaka. Can you go over these two shows for everybody?
Yeah, so on the first show in Yokohama, Hiroki, he's going to defend the independent junior heavyweight title against Riki Fuji. The independent title is the former FMW junior heavyweight title that Riki Fuji had won back in 1994, so Riki's trying to win a title that he once had years prior. This is going to be Riki's last match as a regular in Freedoms. He would end up hitting a Tiger Driver on Hiroki, but as he would go to pick up Hiroki for a brainbuster, Hiroki would manage to escape and lay a kick to Riki, and then deliver a transfer kick to Riki to get the win. So Hiroki defends the title, and like I said, this is Riki's last match in Freedoms as a regular. So Riki doesn't know it at this point, but he is essentially done with Freedoms. And then the main event's going to be Mammoth Sasaki going up against Kamui in a hardcore match. Mammoth and Kamui, they had lost the hardcore tag titles a month prior, and so this match is there to kind of, get them in shape and get them ready to show that they are capable of going at it against the Brahmin Brothers at a future date. Kamui, he would end up jumping Mammoth with a ladder and then somersault diving off the apron onto Mammoth. Kamui would then end up hitting an Asai moonsault to the outside and then stack a bunch of chairs over Mammoth and hit a swanton bomb and then try to wrap a chain around Mammoth's neck, but Mammoth would end up hitting a chokeslam on Kamui and then trying for the Mammoth home run, but Kamui would end up escaping and rolling Mammoth up for a 2, followed by a Pele kick, and then climb up a ladder and begin hanging Mammoth with the chain, but Mammoth would end up knocking Kamui off the ladder and hitting a Liger bomb and then hit a 29 years old on a barbed wire bat for the win. So Mammoth again picks up the win over Kamui, and then after the match they would shake hands and agree that they were both ready to win back the WEW Hardcore tag titles at the next show. So that would take us to Osaka 6 days later, where Mammoth and Kamui, they challenged the Brahmin Brothers for the WEW Hardcore tag titles. The Brahmin Brothers, they would start by spitting water in both Mammoth and Kamui's face, and then taking them to the outside. They would end up fighting in the crowd, as one of the Brahmin Brothers would end up grabbing a trash can and just throwing all the trash inside of it all over the crowd. They would end up making it back in the ring with Kamui wrapping the chain around Brahmin Ki's neck and tossing him over the top, with Shu making the save with a barbed wire bat. Eventually, Mammoth would end up coming in and making the save and setting a chair over Ki's head, as Kamui would end up hitting a Mammoth home run, followed by Mammoth hitting a 29 years old and Kamui hitting a Firebird splash to get the win. So Mammoth and Kamui end up winning back the WEW Hardcore tag titles from the Brahmin Brothers. So Mammoth ends up winning back the WEW Hardcore tag title. Like I mentioned last episode, Mammoth was a part of the first champions along with Hideki Osaka back in 2000. This would end up being Mammoth's last reign as WEW Hardcore tag champions, as the titles would end up going back to Kaientai Dojo about 6 months later.
Masashi Takeda would challenge Abdullah Kobayashi for the Big Japan Deathmatch title on February 26th at Corrigan Hall. Can you go over this death match?
So this is going to be a fluorescent light tube spike nails death match, and they would start this match off by breaking light tubes over one another's head. Takeda would end up breaking light tubes all over the ring and just begin rolling Kobayashi's back into the glass before punching a light tube into Kobayashi's head. Takeda would then try for a knee, but Kobayashi would catch him and drop Takeda on the mat, but Takeda would end up picking up a light tube and just rushing it right into Kobayashi, breaking that light tube across Kobayashi. Takeda would then try for an Olympic slam, but Kobayashi would grab a light tube and smash it over Takeda's head, and then hit a reverse fire thunder into the light tubes on Takeda. Kobayashi would then end up going up to the top for an elbow, but miss, and then Takeda would end up grabbing a stack of light tubes and punching them right in Kobayashi's face multiple times. Takeda would then end up bringing in the board and nails and then suplex Kobayashi into them, followed by a suplex into a stack of light tubes, with Kobayashi still managing to kick out. Takeda would then try for a dragon suplex into the stack of light tubes, but Kobayashi would manage to escape, and then Takeda would end up going for a lariat, with Kobayashi ducking it and throwing Takeda into the spike nails. Kobayashi would then powerbomb Takeda into the spike nails, followed by just throwing stacks upon stacks of light tubes at Takeda's head, and then place the nail board over Takeda's body and hit an elbow drop off the top rope for the win. So Takeda controlled the majority of this match, but Kobayashi ends up getting the win. Fans would be chanting for Takeda afterwards as they would want to continue to support him, but having only worked in Big Japan for 4 years at this point, not being an actual Big Japan contracted wrestler, and right now Kobayashi along with Ito, they're the two beloved ones in Big Japan. It's going to be a while before Takeda gets the ball and a chance to run with it. Right now, Kobayashi has the ball, and he's getting the chance to run with it after Ito had his long reign. And this was a good match, but regardless, this is Kobayashi's time, and Big Japan is going to go all out on this title run, trying to make him this classic champion when it really just depends on who he's facing, as we'll cover a little bit more in this episode.
The Apache Army would then run their first show in Tokyo for the year on February 29th, with another member turning on the Apache Army and joining the Apache Demolition. Can you talk about what happened?
So the semi-main event of this show is going to be Kintaro Kanemura and Madaka taking on the Apache Demolition team of Tomohiko Hashimoto and Kinjo Nishimura. They would start with Madaka hitting a Hurricane Rana on Hashimoto before both would end up tagging out, and Kanemura and Nishimura would end up squaring off. Well, Nishimura, he would end up knocking Kanemura out of the ring and diving over the top onto him when the masked manager of the Apache Demolition, Hazard, would come over and help attack Kanemura. Eventually, Kanemura would end up getting free and getting back in the ring and lifting Nishimura's shirt over his head and begin chopping him in the chest, with Madaka getting tagged in and doing the same thing to him. Eventually, Kanemura and Hashimoto, they would end up going at it, with Hazard getting in the ring and trying to throw fireworks in Kanemura's face. But Kanemura would move out of the way, and Hashimoto would end up getting in the face instead. And then Kanemura would grab a hold of Nishimura, with Madaka running right at them and then suddenly stopping right before, as Nishimura would kick Kanemura low, and Madaka would end up laying Kanemura out with a kick, followed by Madaka and Nishimura hitting frog splashes on Kanemura, as Nishimura would end up picking up the pinfall over Kanemura, as it would be revealed that Madaka is the newest member of the Apache Demolition, and they would end up standing over Kanemura when Kazuyushi Miyamoto and Dasaku Shimoda would rush to the ring to make the save for Kanemura. So the Apache Demolition keeps getting new members, turning on the Apache Army pretty much every month at this point. And then the main event's going to be Arashi defending the WEW title against Tetsuhiro Kuroda. It would not be long when Kuroda would end up finding his way on the outside, and the Apache Demolition team would end up hitting the ring and attacking him, including Hazard giving Kuroda a cane shot to the head, before Arashi would end up rolling out of the ring and begin attacking them and chasing them off, not wanting their help. So this is officially Arashi's face turn here, not siding with the Apache Demolition. Kuroda would end up getting back in the ring, and Arashi would end up hitting Kuroda with the powerbomb and then a choke slam, with Kuroda managing to kick out, but Arashi would end up hitting another powerbomb, as Kuroda would never really recover from the Apache Demolition attack, and Arashi would end up getting the win over Kuroda. Afterwards, Arashi would shake hands with Kuroda, as, like I said, Arashi is now a face and going to go up against the Apache Demolition team along with Kuroda and Kanemura.
Some new faces would start showing up in Freedoms, including a new heel group on March 13th in Shinkiba. Can you talk about the show and the new people appearing?
So they would announce a crowd of 120 fans for this show, which is the lowest number the Freedoms has ever done in Shinkiba, and it might still be the lowest number ever in this building. So this was a big disappointment. I'll go over in a second probably why the show did so poorly. But before Jun Kasai and the Winger would team up to take on the Brahmin brothers, Kinji Fukimoto would come to the ring, and I talked about him last episode, how he was absolutely hated by Freedoms. All the fans hated him. Jun Kasai hated him. All the wrestlers, wanted nothing to do with him. He worked for the FUCK promotion, so he was this outsider that no one liked, having this kind of blood feud against Kasai. Well, Fukimoto announces that his promotion, the FUCK promotion, has closed down, and he needs a job. And so he asks Kasai if he could have a job with Freedoms. And Kasai just kind of blows him off, tells him to go away. Hey, you were a prick last year. Why would I want you working with me now? So Kasai tells Fukimoto to go away. Well, while he's dealing with Fukimoto, the Brahmin brothers end up jumping Kasai. End of the match would see Ki delivering a kick to Winger low, followed by Shu hitting the Winger with the street sign, and the Brahmin brothers would end up rolling the Winger up with Nobody's Perfect, their finisher, for the win. So the Brahmin brothers pick up the win. Well, after the match, the Brahmin brothers, they would continue to attack Kasai and the Winger before pulling Fukimoto, who had sat around ringside watching the match. They would pull him into the ring and begin attacking him as well. Well, Kasai would end up coming back and grabbing one of the Brahmin brothers, and the Fukimoto would end up striking them both before the Brahmin brothers would end up just leaving. So Fukimoto helps Kasai out here. Afterwards, Fukimoto would bow to Kasai and needing a job. Kasai would announce to Fukimoto that he would let him have a one-match tryout against Takeda at the next show, and if he proves his worth, he can have a job, but he has to show his worth against Takeda in a death match. And then the semi-main event, it's going to be Jintaro taking on Suzumu. Suzumu is a longtime independent wrestler in Japan looking for a permanent home, so pretty much this is a tryout match for him as well, as he takes on Jintaro, who Takashi Sasaki feels is the actual best wrestler in the promotion, although I haven't been the biggest fan of his over the last couple years. But Suzumu, he would end up hitting some cool-looking moves, including a spinning heel kick off the top, and then a splash off the top rope as well, before Jintaro would end up getting his knees up, and then rolling Suzumu up for the win. So afterwards, Jintaro gives his appraisal of Suzumu after the match. So Suzumu would eventually end up getting a full-time job with Freedoms, which he still currently has to this day. And then the main event's going to be Takashi Sasaki, Mama Sasaki, and Kamui taking on Keizo Masuda, who is an IWA Japan wrestler, Kuga, the former Asian Cougar, and Bear Fukuda, who works for Secret Base, the small independent promotion. And they're going to be a part of a group called the Keizo Army, and they're taking the spot of the Kajika Army, which has been the top heel group essentially for the first year or so of Freedoms. Well, the Kajika Army now is just Kajika, Antonio Honda, and Ken Oka, and they've been pretty much relegated to opening match comedy. So the Keizo Army is kind of going to be put in, at least the thought is, hey, they're going to take over the spot as the top heel group. And right now they're the top heel group in the current IWA Japan promotion, so it's kind of be like Freedoms versus IWA Japan. Obviously, this IWA Japan is nothing like what most people think of IWA Japan from, mid-90s death matches. This is more of a comedy promotion at this point, much smaller. Anyway, the match would start with Kamui hitting an Asai moonsault early on the outside, and then Mammoth and Takashi, they would end up facing off against Kuga and Fukuda before Takashi and Masuda would end up facing off, and Fukuda would end up smashing a chair against Takashi Sasaki's back, and Masuda would end up using a cradle to pick up the win over Takashi Sasaki, as this new group looks to be pushed as the new heel group, despite sucking and not having really any charm of the Kajika Army, with Freedoms quickly realizing it. Like I said, Freedoms is thinking that this is going to be the new heel group. Well, this show is the smallest attended show ever in Freedoms at Shinkiba, so Freedoms quickly realized, okay, this group isn't working, and this group essentially became mid-card after this show. They knew not to push this, this set of guys as the top heel group. They knew right away this isn't going to work, and they're going to look elsewhere to create a new heel group very, very soon.
Kanemura would tell the crowd about his injuries before the Apache Army show on March 25th in Shinkiba. Can you tell us what he told the crowd, and can you go over the main event of the show?
So to start the show, Kanemura and Kazutaka Hasegawa, they would come to the ring, and Kanemura would announce that due to his health failing, he would not be able to wrestle on the show. Kanemura would tell the fans that he had lost the feelings in his hands and feet over the past week and had to go to the hospital as a result, where the doctors had feared that Kanemura was suffering from motor nerve damage, which is a result of brain damage of wrestling the style that he's been wrestling over the last 20 years and put his body through. Kanemura had been given an MRI by the doctors, but nothing out of the ordinary came from that test. And Kanemura had told Hasegawa that he had no problems with his brain, and he wanted to continue to wrestle, but Hasegawa had to step in and tell Kanemura that the fans are going to understand that he's going to miss some shows to try and recover. So Kanemura would apologize, having to cancel his upcoming matches, and Kanemura is going to end up being out of action for 3 months to recover. On this show, Hiroki, he would end up taking on the newly turned heel Madaka, and this match would not go long as Hashimoto and Nishimura, they would end up hitting the ring and attacking Hiroki, with the referee just throwing the match out, when Hasegawa, he would end up coming in the ring and requesting the match be restarted. So the referee's going to restart the match pretty much because the boss told him to do so. Madaka would end up throwing Hiroki around ringside before getting back in the ring. Hiroki would end up charging Madaka, but Madaka would end up pulling the referee in front of him, and that would allow Tomohiko Hashimoto to get in the ring and try and hit Hiroki with a chair, when Hasegawa would end up jumping on the apron and grabbing the chair from Hashimoto, allowing Hiroki to hit Hashimoto with a drop kick and then hit Madaka with a trans-rave kick. But the Apache Demolition, they would end up pulling the referee from out of the ring and begin attacking Hiroki with a chair, as the referee would have to call for the match and give Hiroki the disqualification win. This is the beginning of Hasegawa wanting to get more involved in the product that he's financially supporting, and so you're going to see him get more and more involved as the months go by. And the main event's going to be Kazushi Miyamoto, Daisaku Shimoto, and Yusaku Obata taking on Takeshi Minamino, Manjimaru, and Kinjo Nishimura, the Apache Demolition team. This is really a nothing match. Shimoto would end up going for a back suplex when Minamino would end up hitting him with a chair, and then Minamino would end up backsliding Shimoto for the win. Like I said, nothing match, nothing show, really. They're really just kind of pushing the Apache Demolition as this top heel group to one day lead to the Apache Army getting the big win, but the problem is they're losing fans. The few fans they have, they're losing them per show every month, and fans just don't really have the interest to stay along, especially now with Kanemura out for a couple months. The Apache Army is going to be in some serious trouble here going forward.
Another new heel faction called Unchained would be created on March 30th in Freedoms at Shinkiba. Can you talk about the show and go over how Unchained was formed?
The show would end up announcing a crowd of 168 fans, which is more the norm of what Freedoms had been doing over the last couple months. It's much better than what they had done earlier in the month, which was a record low in Shinkiba. On this show, the opening match is going to be the Brahman Brothers and Kazuhiko Ogasawara taking on Great Kajika, Antonio Honda, and Ken Oka. So it's going to be a Kajika Army versus the former member match. Before the match would even start, the Brahman Brothers would introduce their cousin, Karate Brahman, who is CG Kitagawa. He's pretty much playing a guy that is not all there in the head. Definitely a comedy wrestler, but he's a black belt in karate, and he's willing to show that he's can deal with any type of punishment, and the Brahman Brothers are more than happy to show the fans what kind of punishment they can do to their cousin, and that includes putting a concrete block over his head and hitting it with a hammer and breaking the concrete block to show that he can pretty much take anything to the head. So the Brahman Brothers pretty much had their cousin on display here as a way to introduce him, and then they would end up jumping the Kajika Army and brawling with them all over the building. Ai Miyazaki, a Ice Ribbon women's wrestler, she had recently begun accompanying the Kajika Army. She would get in the ring, and Karate would end up grabbing her as one of the Brahman Brothers would go to spit Indian ink in her face. She would move out of the way, though, and the Brahman Brother would end up spitting in the Indian ink in Karate Brahman's face instead. And then Miyazaki would hit Karate Brahman with a low blow, and then she would grab the Indian ink as Kajika would grab a hold of one of the Brahmins, and she would spit horribly with the ink barely getting on the Brahman Brother before Kajika would end up just hitting a choke slam on him and making the cover, as Ogasawara would make the save by chopping the referee for the DQ. So this is just another way of introducing some new wrestlers to Freedoms. Toru Sugawara, he's a Nagoya independent wrestler looking for a bigger promotion, and so he's looking for a job just like a couple of these other wrestlers that have just started appearing. He's going to take on Mama Sasaki. Sugawara, he would end up showing some fight, hitting a flying dropkick, but Mammoth would end up grabbing a hold of him for a German suplex and then a powerbomb, followed by the 29 years old for the win, leaving Sugawara with a busted nose afterwards. So again, just another young wrestler in the independent scene looking for a bigger independent home in Freedoms. Freedoms doesn't pay that much, but it pays better than a lot of these local small promotions that you really make nothing. At least you can make some money with Freedoms, especially if you get in the upper card. And then Masashi Takeda is going to take on Kenji Fukimoto in a Scramble Bunkhouse secret item death match. I mentioned earlier how Kasai, he's giving Fukimoto a shot to prove himself, to show that he's worthy enough being a part of Freedoms. And so this is going to be a death match to show that he can, hang with the elite like Masashi Takeda. Takeda, he would end up grabbing a barbed wire bat and begin cutting open Fukimoto right away outside the ring until Fukimoto would end up pulling out a saw from under the ring and begin using it on Takeda. Fukimoto, he would end up charging at Takeda, but Takeda would lift him, causing Fukimoto to hit himself in the head with the saw outside the ring. Takeda would then pull out a barbed wire board from under the ring and then toss Fukimoto into it, and then Takeda would end up putting the barbed wire board over Fukimoto's back and smash it with the barbed wire bat, and then take the barbed wire from the board and begin drop kicking the back of Fukimoto's head, and then Fukimoto would manage to fight back, throwing a barbed wire at Takeda, and then grabbing a board with saws on it, but Takeda would end up slamming him on it, and then Takeda would suplex Fukimoto off the apron, and they would end up getting back in the ring, and both would smash broken pieces of the barbed wire board over each other's head, with Takeda getting the upper hand and hitting Fukimoto with an Olympic slam with the barbed wire stuck in Fukimoto's head, before Takeda would end up finishing Fukimoto off with a running knee to the broken barbed wire board piece to the head of Fukimoto for the win. So afterwards, Kasai would come to the ring and give praise to Fukimoto like he had passed the test, and would end up being given a job to Freedoms as a result. And then the main event's going to be Jun Kasai and Takashi Sasaki teaming up to take on the Keizo Army of Keizo Masuda and Bear Fukuda. Masuda would end up going to charge at Takashi when Kasai would grab his leg, giving Sasaki the opportunity to hit Masuda with the lariat and then a D-Geist, followed by Kasai hitting a Pearl Harbor Splash, and then Sasaki hitting a Michinoku Driver 2, and then delivering a kick to the head of Masuda for the win. So the Freedoms team defeats the Keizo Army. Keizo Army's going to get pushed down to the mid-card going forward. They had that one shot really to kind of prove themselves on the last show, and it was the worst drawing show ever in Shikiba, and so now they're just going to be a mid-card act going forward. Sasaki, he would end up getting on the mic afterwards, looking to do his post-match chant with the crowd, when Kasai, out of nowhere, would end up hitting Takashi with a lariat, and then begin stomping Takashi before getting on the mic and announcing that he was leaving the Freedoms group, as Masashi Takeda and Kenji Fukimoto would enter the ring with Kasai, and Kasai would end up announcing that he's going to start up his own group called Unchained. So instead of using an outside group like they've been doing, they're going to use Kasai here as the top heel, and he's going to lead the new heel group against Freedoms. Sasaki, he would end up getting up and begin slapping Kasai in the face as Kasai would slap him back, and they would begin attacking one another, with Takeda and Fukimoto helping Kasai attack Takashi, as the Freedom wrestlers, they would end up hitting the ring, but quickly get tossed out before Mammoth Sasaki would rush to the ring, and Unchained would head out after Mammoth would hit the ring. And so, like I said, Unchained is going to be the new heel group in Freedoms, as they would all raise each other's arms. Takashi Sasaki and the rest of the Freedoms wrestlers, they would raise their arms, and Sasaki would declare war on Unchained at Corrigan Hall in May. So this was pretty much Freedoms going, oh crap, we have a Corrigan Hall show in a month. We have no real ideas. We were going to try with the Keizo Army to main event Corrigan Hall with that, but just a small sample of running one Shinkiba show was a complete disaster. We can't have them main event Corrigan Hall. So what are we going to do? Let's turn Kasai heel and have him face off against the Freedoms group to see if that will work. And we'll go over here in a second. Due to unforeseen circumstances, the Corrigan Hall show would end up being a complete disaster.
Atsushi Onita would appear in 0-1 on April 24th at Corrigan Hall in a tag match against Akebono. Can you talk about the setup of the match and what took place to begin this Onita versus Akebono feud?
So Atsushi Onita is going to team up with Masada Tanaka here to take on Akebono and Shinjiro Otani. And how this match came about was Onita had randomly appeared for the first time in a long time in 0-1 on the March 2nd show and had challenged Akebono to a tag match at the next show. And so there's no bad blood between the two. Onita just wants to have a match with Akebono. Akebono, respects Onita. He actually opens the rope to let Onita in the ring to start the match. And the match would start with Onita and Akebono, with Akebono tossing Onita down. Eventually, Onita would end up going into the crowd and telling Akebono to join him to brawl in the crowd with him. Otani would try to stop Akebono from brawling with Onita, but Akebono would end up just throwing Otani down and head towards Onita, with Tanaka jumping Akebono, and then Onita would end up grabbing Akebono and begin hitting him with the chair in the bleachers. Onita would then focus on Otani as he would pile drive Otani through a table on the outside, and then Onita and Tanaka would focus on busting open Akebono. Akebono would then fight back by tossing both Onita and Tanaka in the corner and splashing them in the corner as well, and then dropping an elbow on Onita. Akebono would then end up picking up Onita and looking to choke bomb him when Onita would end up spitting red mist in Akebono's face, and Onita's career would have a resurgence right at that moment, as Onita would end up smashing a chair over Akebono's head, and Tanaka would end up hitting a sliding D on Akebono for the win. The Onita-Akebono feud was now underway, as Onita would end up giving a double bird to Akebono as the fans would chant for Onita, as Onita would now have something to do that was not completely based around nostalgia, and Onita's career is about to take off again for the first time since his time in New Japan in 1999, as he would end up tossing water at the crowd and head out. So this is going to be a feud that's going to last for a good long while, and it would be a successful feud, and it all started based off this, where, hey, this was going to be a friendly contest. Onita challenged me, and, okay, he's a hardcore wrestler, I'll wrestle that style. Well, now Onita's spitting mist in my face and giving me the double bird. Hey, Onita's kind of a jerk, and you know what? The fans are cheering him. The fans are cheering this jerk who's doing all these heel moves, and this clicked. Having Onita be a heel, but still be the babyface, and Akebono not cheating or anything like that, and the fans don't really care. They want Onita to beat Akebono, and this is what's going to start the resurgence, like I said, of Onita's career, that pretty much would take him to today.
Jun Kasai would suffer an injury prior to the Freedom Show on April 25th at Shinkiba. Can you talk about the injury and how it affected the change of the show and the top 3 matches on this show?
So they would announce a crowd of 148 fans, which is up from the worst number they had ever done the previous month, but still by no means a good number. But a big factor in that number, I would guess, is because Jun Kasai would not wrestle on this show, and what happened was he had suffered a serious knee injury while touring with Big Japan on a house show 2 days earlier on April 23rd. He ended up rupturing the front of his kneecap, that he had originally injured back in March 2009. So I went over how Kasai had missed 2 months of time while working for Takashi Sasaki's Apache Army promotion, and while Kasai was out, those shows were horribly attended, and he pretty much rushed himself back, and he was not ready, and now here it is 2 years later, and he's feeling the effects of this, of seriously injuring himself because he came back too soon. So he pretty much never let it heal. His kneecap would also rupture as a result of the front of his knee rupturing, and he also had damage to the back of his knee, a high ankle sprain, elbow damage, with Kasai saying that he was going to come back as soon as he could deal with the pain. So he's in a lot of pain. If he can just deal with it, then he's willing to come back. But he's not in any condition to wrestle at this point, although he's not going to do surgery or anything like that. But he's going to be out for some time, and as a result, like I said, this show didn't do very well, and we'll go over here. Freedoms would feel the effect of some other shows that he would not participate on. Well, with Kasai out, they were going to have 3 singles matches between the Unchained members and the Freedoms members to set up the Corrigan Hall show. Well, They would end up having to kind of spoil their Korakuen Hall surprise, which was going to be Tomohiko Hama appearing at the Korakuen Hall show. Well, they're going to end up using him for this show instead as a mystery opponent. He's going to end up going up against Kamui in the first match. Hama is fresh off being let go by New Japan, having pretty much shady dealings with the Yakuza, and so Hama had been let go, and now he's going to work the independent scene like Freedoms and 0-1. Kamui, he would end up hitting Hama with a Hurricane Rana, and then an Asai Moonsault, and then throwing a stack of chairs on Hama, and hitting a Swanton Bomb, and then wrapping the chain around Hama's neck, but Hama would prevent himself from being tossed over the top, and then meet Kamui with an elbow, and then grab the chain and hit Kamui with the lariat, with the chain wrapped around his arm, and then finish Kamui off with a diving headbutt in just under 7 minutes. And then Mema Sasaki, he's going to take on Kinji Fukimoto. Fukimoto would hit the ring and attack Mammoth with the chair, and would try to suplex Mammoth off the apron, but Mammoth would end up suplexing Fukimoto instead, and then Mammoth would take Fukimoto apart using a barbed bat, and then chairs before finishing him off with the 29 years old to tie it 1-1. So it's going to come down to Takashi Sasaki taking on Masashi Takeda. They would fight outside the ring right away, with Sasaki trying to suplex Takeda off the apron on a stack of chairs, but Takeda would reverse it and suplex Takashi instead. Takeda would then grab a ladder and try to suplex Takashi off the top rope, but Takashi would get under Takeda and powerbomb him on the ladder instead, and then Takashi would end up finishing Takeda off with a D-Jice on the ladder for the win in an 8-minute match. As all three of these matches are short matches, they would all go under 10 minutes. Sasaki would then challenge Hama to a singles match at Korakuen Hall in the next week, as the original match was going to be Takashi and Mammoth taking on Hama and Kasai. All the young wrestlers with Freedoms would get in the ring, as all the wrestlers would raise their arms, getting ready to go to battle with Unchained at Korakuen Hall. So, like I mentioned, they were not planning on using Hama for this show. Hama was going to be the big surprise and big draw for the Korakuen Hall show, and his first appearance for the promotion. Well, with Kasai out, they kind of had to go use him as an emergency for this show as a surprise. So, I don't know how much of a draw Hama making his first appearance for Freedoms instead of a mystery role really meant, but I'll go over here in a second that it is definitely proven that Kasai is a draw for Freedoms, having missed this show and the next Korakuen Hall show.
Tetsuhiro Kuroda would challenge for the WEW title one final time on April 26th in Shinkiba. Can you talk about this match and go over the state of the Apache Army?
So I talked about a little while ago how the Apache Army was really struggling. They had a very small fan base, and that fan base is declining, and you add in the fact that Kanemura is now going to be out for a couple months, that decline's going to get even greater. On this show, they would also lose their DVD distributor, and so now fans can't even keep up with the product unless they attend the show month by month. On this show, though, Kuroda, he's going to challenge for the WEW title against Arashi, with Kuroda wearing Koto Fuyuki's jacket. So, it's kind of supposed to bring good luck to finally bring back the WEW title, which Kuroda does manage to do, finally defeats Arashi, but like I said, this was not taped. Kuroda would end up pinning Arashi with a lariat to win the WEW title, but eventually Kuroda would end up just vacating the title, as the Apache Army would announce that they're going to hold a 16-man tournament throughout the next couple months, and the winner is going to be the next WEW champion. So Kuroda gets the big win, it's not taped, and he ends up vacating the title anyway on this show.
Freedoms would hold their first Korakuen Hall show on May 2nd, in what would be a financial failure for the promotion. Can you talk about why this show did not do well, and go over some of the main matches on the show?
So they would announce a crowd of 594 fans for this show, which is a complete disaster. The lowest attended Korakuen Hall show for Freedoms ever, still to this day, under the Freedoms name. Kasai is a proven draw here by just how poor this show did. They had to switch the card around, like I mentioned earlier. The winger, who was originally supposed to take on Unchained in a tag match, is now going to take on two women instead. He's going to take on Kaori Yoneyama and Emi Sakura. He's facing Yoneyama because, back in November, they main evented Shinkiba, and that show did pretty well. So let's see if we threw this in the undercard of a Korakuen Hall show, if it could help draw. Obviously, with how how poorly attended this show was. It doesn't seem like it drew very well at all, but, it's an undercard match, and Sakura and Yoneyama, they would end up attacking the Winger right away. They would control the early portion of the match, tagging in and out until the Winger would end up catching Yoneyama and putting her in the old Shakuba sexual innuendo position before suplexing her. The Winger would then end up picking up both Yoneyama and Sakura and placing them upside down in the corner before picking up referee Nikon Lee and putting her upside down in the corner as well, and then grabbing Kaintai Dojo young boy Ryuji Sekini, who was doing ring work around ringside, and putting him upside down as well before doing his creepy pose, as Emi would end up falling down and running to help Nikon Lee. The Winger would end up grabbing Yoneyama's face and just stare at her as she would scream before Emi would manage to make the save for her. Yoneyama would end up slamming the Winger, and then both her and Emi would end up giving Vader bombs at the same time to the Winger. The Winger would end up coming back and slamming both of them, but Emi would end up rolling the Winger up with the La Magistral as Yoneyama would flip over to make sure that the Winger would stay down, as they both would end up pinning the Winger for the win. So again, the Winger ends up doing the job to women's wrestlers in a comedy undercard match. And then the Brahman brothers are going to team up with Kazuhiko Ogasawara once again, and they're going to take on the Keizo army of Keizo Masuda, Kuga, and Bear Fukuda. Karate Brahman, he would come to the ring dressed up as a DJ, and he would begin rapping before the start of this match, as the Brahman brothers, they would end up breaking concrete blocks over his head. They would end up starting off by brawling all over Corrigan Hall. Eventually, Shu and Masuda, they would make it back in the ring with Shu spitting Indian ink in Masuda's face. Fukuda then would end up hitting Shu with a clothesline, as Fukuda would grab the Indian ink bottle and pour it all over Shu's head. They would all start brawling all over the building once again, as Karate Brahman, the only one in the ring, would grab the mic and just begin rapping in the ring all alone, as no one would make it back to the ring, and they would all end up being double counted out as a result in a pretty entertaining comedy match, all due to Karate Brahman. And then Mama Sasaki and Kamui, they're going to defend the WEW Hardcore Tag titles against Masashi Takeda and Kenji Fukimoto. They would all start off brawling all around ringside, as Mammoth and Fukimoto would end up fighting up the bleachers. Kamui would end up setting up a stack of chairs and place a board on the apron and hit a Death Valley bomb on Takeda, sending him through the board. They would end up making it back in the ring with Kamui holding Takeda, but as Mammoth would go to hit him with a chair, he would end up moving out of the way, and Mammoth would accidentally end up hitting Kamui over the head with it instead, as Takeda would dropkick Mammoth and then suplex Mammoth. Takeda would then place the ladder over Kamui and then suplex Fukimoto off the top, causing him to crash right into Kamui. Takeda would then hit a German on the ladder, but as he would end up going for the pin, Mammoth would pick him up and suplex him, and Mammoth and Kamui would end up hitting a Mammoth home run on Fukimoto, as Kamui would then end up hitting a Firebird Splash on Fukimoto for the win. This would be the last time that the WW Hardcore Tag titles were defended in Freedoms, as Mammoth and Kamui would end up having to vacate them in August after Mammoth had suffered a neck injury in June. So I may mention earlier how this was Mammoth's last title reign as champion, and sadly, like I said, this was his last title match as WW Hardcore Tag Team Champion. So it's pretty much ranging 12 years from his first reign to his last reign. The semi-main event is going to be Jintaro and Tetsuhito Takaiwa taking on Tatsumi Fujinami and Akira. The finishing spot here would see Jintaro and Fujinami getting tagged into a very hot crowd ovation. Jintaro would end up knocking Fujinami down and putting Fujinami in the sharpshooter, but Akira would make the save for Fujinami, as Jintaro would unsuccessfully try a dragon screw, with Fujinami instead hitting the dragon screw on Jintaro and Takaiwa. Takaiwa and Jintaro, they would eventually end up double teaming Fujinami, leading to Jintaro getting up and missing a shooting star press on Fujinami, and then Fujinami would put Jintaro in the Dragon Sleeper for the win. Really nothing of a match, is really just to get the legend Tatsumi Fujinami on the show, but again, this show did not do very well, so I don't know how much he really drew. Then the main event's going to be Takashi Sasaki taking on Tomohiko Hama in a hardcore match. Sasaki would go after Hama right away and would send Hama out and dive over the top onto him, and then they would brawl in the crowd before getting back in the ring, with Hama hitting Takashi with a chair shot. Hama would then end up suplexing Takashi off the top on a ladder, but Takashi would end up no-selling it and clotheslining Hama. Sasaki then would end up hitting the Michinoku Driver 2 on a stack of chairs, and then try for a tombstone on a ladder, with Hama escaping and hitting hitting a German suplex on Takashi. Hama would then toss the ladder at Takashi's head and then hit a Fire Thunder with Takashi kicking out, and then Hama would end up hitting a diving headbutt followed by another one off the ladder and then another Fire Thunder for the win. And so this was just pretty much a basic hardcore match. Sasaki at this point, he's nowhere near the level he was even just 2 years earlier. Hanma can be great, but it really just depends on the situation. You add in the fact that this building looks empty, and again, it's just kind of an okay, match. And it really was a disappointment that this show did so poorly. This is only the third Korakuen Hall show for Freedoms, and so for the magic to already be gone, even without Kasai on it, it pretty much changed Freedoms. Freedoms is going to go in a completely different direction here, because, hey, we're trying the Freedoms hardcore, silly, gimmicky style, and, without Jun Kasai, we suck. We are losing money. We can't draw without Jun Kasai, so we're gonna kind of change the direction of this company, and that's what they would do here coming up in the next couple months.
Big Japan would hold their Yokohama Bunka Gym show on May 5th with the creation of a new title for the promotion. Can you go over the title matches on the show?
So on this show, they're going to determine the very first Big Japan Strong Heavyweight Champion. The match is going to be Yoshihiro Sasaki against Walter. And they would end up starting off with chops with one another to the chest before Walter would end up throwing Yoshihiro outside the ring and slamming him and then kicking him in the back. They would end up getting back on the apron and chopping one another until Walter would clothesline Sasaki back in the ring. Sasaki would then try to put Walter in the torture rack, but Walter would turn it into a back suplex, and they would end up going back to exchanging chops to one another before Walter would end up hitting a powerbomb to Sasaki, but Sasaki would come back and hit a lariat for two. Sasaki would then end up hitting Walter with a suplex off the top, but Walter would get right up and hit a lariat and then a powerbomb, and then follow that up with a Fire Thunder with Sasaki still kicking out. Walter would then try for another Fire Thunder, but Sasaki would escape and hit Walter with a lariat, followed by a headbutt, and then multiple lariats to get the win. So Yoshihiro Sasaki becomes the first Big Japan Strong Heavyweight Champion. Sekimoto, he's going to be the ace of this division. Pretty much at this point, the Big Japan promotion has just splintered, and half of it's deathmatch, half of it's strong, with Sekimoto being the top star in the strong division. So like I said, he's going to be the ace of the division. But in the meantime, Sasaki, he's the number 2 in the division, so they figured they might as well just wait to give Sekimoto his big win to eventually win the title, down the road. So in the meantime, Sasaki, he's going to be the strong heavyweight champion for Big Japan going forward for the next couple months until, they decide, well, we want Daisuke Sekimoto to hold it. But Yoshihiro would end up holding the title for the rest of the year and have a good run while holding it. And then Abdullah Kobayashi is going to defend the Big Japan Deathmatch title against Shuji Ishikawa in a light tubes barbed wire board deathmatch. Light tubes are all over the mat to start this. They would end up throwing one another into the light tubes before going into the outside, where they would end up taking turns hitting one another over the head with the light tubes. They would end up getting back in the ring, and Kobayashi would begin headbutting the light tubes into Ishikawa's head, and then Kobayashi would try for a chop off the top rope, but Ishikawa would catch him and begin headbutting Kobayashi and then suplex him off the top onto a stack of light tubes. Ishikawa would then charge at Kobayashi with a stack of light tubes, but Kobayashi would chop them, causing them to break on Ishikawa. Kobayashi would then end up taking his pants off and hitting a Shining Wizard on Ishikawa, followed by just tossing light tubes at Ishikawa's head. Kobayashi would then dive off the top with Ishikawa moving out of the way, and Ishikawa would hit an awkward-looking Fire Thunder, with Ishikawa then taking off his pants and headbutting Kobayashi, knocking Kobayashi out and hitting a back suplex on him. Ishikawa would then wrap barbed wire around Kobayashi's head and hit a back suplex, and then Ishikawa would try to set Kobayashi up for the Splash Mountain Powerbomb, but Kobayashi would pick Ishikawa up and hit a reverse Fire Thunder into the barbed wire, and then Kobayashi would begin punching Ishikawa and just tossing light tubes at Ishikawa's head, and then hit a diving elbow for the win. So this match had no heat, nobody really cared. There was too much of the same stuff at this point to stand out. I felt like I said light tubes 100 times when describing this match. This is supposed to be the main event of one of the 2 big shows of the year, and no one really cared, and nothing was different than a regular Korakuen Hall show, and Kobayashi would have better matches later on this year at Korakuen Hall. The only real thing that stood out in this match is both Kobayashi and Ishikawa took off their pants during this match.
Masada Tanaka would challenge Akebono for the World Heavyweight title on June 14th at Korakuen Hall for 0-1. Can you go over this match?
Yeah, so this match was made due to Tanaka getting a pinfall win over Akebono in the tag match back in April. And Tanaka, early on, he would manage to knock Akebono down on his feet and begin working on his knee. And then Tanaka would charge at Akebono, but Akebono would pull the rope down, causing Tanaka to go flying outside the ring, where Akebono would place Tanaka on a table outside and get on top of the apron and hit an elbow drop off the apron, causing Tanaka to go flying off the table and the table not actually break. Eventually, they would end up getting back in the ring where Tanaka would knock Akebono down once again and hit a sliding D, but Akebono would manage to kick out. And then Tanaka would charge at Akebono, but Akebono would grab him and just throw Tanaka down and then splash Tanaka in the corner, followed by an elbow. Tanaka would manage to get up and charge at Akebono, who would end up catching him and hitting an awesome-looking sidewalk slam. And then Akebono would climb up to the top rope, but Tanaka would manage to get up and powerbomb Akebono, and then Tanaka would hit 2 sliding Ds, but Akebono would still kick out. And then Tanaka would try to suplex Akebono off the top, but Akebono would knock Tanaka off the top and follow that up with a semi-dive off the top for the win to retain his title. So Akebono continues to look strong here as he ends up getting built up in a big match against Atsushi Onita at the Yokohama Bunka Gym in August. So pretty much here, this is just, hey, I beat your student, I beat your disciple, now I want you, Onita. And so the big build here is Akebono and Onita here in the summer leading up to their Yokohama Bunka Gym Exploding Barbed Wire death match.
The Apache Army would run a show on June 16th in Shizuoka, with Kanemura returning from his injury to team up with Atsushi Onita. Can you go over this match?
So I talked about a little while ago how the Apache Army had lost their DVD distributor, and as a result, the last couple shows have not been filmed. Well, they would end up finding a new company out of Osaka to start filming them once again, starting with this show. And this show is going to have Kanemura making his return to the ring after being out of action nearly 3 months, and he's going to team up with Atsushi Onita and Tetsuhiro Kuroda, and they're going to have Hasegawa in their corner to take on the Apache Demolition team of Tomohiko Hashimoto, Manji Maru, and Shoshi Ishimaya, who had recently joined the Apache Demolition. He was a former DDT wrestler that had done a comedy gimmick of wrestling under other wrestlers' gimmicks. I talked about last episode how the last time Onita was on an Apache Army show, he and Kanemura ended the show brawling with one another, not getting along due to their differences of always being on the opposite side since Kanemura had turned on Onita back in FMW in 1997. Well, now after not interacting with one another for 10 months, they're partners now. Pretty much just because they're both faces and they're going to go up against the heel Apache Demolition team. They would all end up brawling outside the ring in the crowd right away. Onita would work on Hashimoto, smashing his head into the garage door of the building. Kanemura would end up setting up Manjimaru on a table outside the ring and then diving off the top, sending Manjimaru through the table. But he would end up being met with Hashimoto and a barbed wire bat that would make Hasegawa come over to Kanemura's rescue, with Hashimoto bringing Hasegawa in the ring. Onita would end up coming in the ring with a broken table piece and smashing it over Hashimoto's head, and then Hasegawa would end up jumping off the top rope and delivering a tornado DDT to Hashimoto, followed by Kuroda hitting a Tekken Buster DDT and pinning Hashimoto, but Hazard would end up coming in the ring and shooting fireworks in Kuroda's face, and that would allow Ichimaya to pin Kuroda to get the Apache Demolition team the win. Afterwards, the Apache Army would clear the ring of the heels, and Onita would do his Onita theater as if his team had not actually just lost, but Apache Demolition team ends up getting the win once again over the Apache Army as they continue to build up this heel group.
Atsushi Onita would appear at Real Japan's show on June 20th at Corrigan Hall to go up against the original Tiger Mask. Can you go over everything that led to the singles match between the two former junior heavyweights from the early 1980s and what happened during the match and afterwards?
So this feud would start back on March 16th at Real Japan in Corrigan Hall when Onita would team up with Ichiro Uguchi to go up against the original Tiger Mask, Satoru Sayama, and the Great Sasuke. Onita would end up going after Tiger Mask right away and throwing him in the crowd, and then Tiger Mask would end up picking up the barbed wire bat, and just as he was about to go hardcore, he would be met by Onita spitting blue mist in his eyes. Uguchi would end up grabbing Sasuke, and as Onita would end up going to smash him over the head with a chair, Sasuke would end up moving out of the way, and Onita would accidentally smash Yaguchi over the head with the chair instead, followed by Tiger Mask grabbing Yaguchi and hitting a tiger suplex for the win, so Sayama and Sasuke pick up the win. This would lead to May 11th at Atsushi Onita's promoted show in Shinjuku Face, when Atsushi Onita, Ichiro Yaguchi, and Hideki Osaka would team up, and this is the creation of the Jado Army. They're going to go up against Satoru Sayama, Tiger Mask, the Great Sasuke, and Gran Hamada in a barbed wire board street fight death match. And Onita and Sayama, they would end up fighting in the crowd and begin a dueling chair spot, and then they would end up getting back in the ring, and Tiger Mask would be met by green mist spit by Onita, and then Yaguchi would hit a power bomb on him with Onita covering Sayama and getting the pin, as Onita would end up getting the win over Sayama and then stepping on Tiger Mask Sayama's neck while cutting a promo. So this feud started all because of Onita and Tiger Mask. They go way back to the early 80s when Onita was the All Japan Junior Heavyweight Ace and Sayama, Tiger Mask, was the New Japan Junior Heavyweight Ace. And so there was always this kind of rival where, hey, either you were a New Japan fan or an All Japan fan. Like Hayabusa growing up, he was a New Japan fan, so he hated Onita because he was the rival to Sayama, and Hayabusa felt like, hey, Sayama's such a better wrestler than Onita, and a lot of people felt like this, and so that's where this natural rivalry comes about, 30 years later at this point now. And, Onita and Tiger Mask are two of the biggest names in Japanese history now. So they're going to main event in a lumberjack death match here, where Onita and Tiger Mask would finally face off against one another in a singles match. And Onita, he would throw Sayama out of the ring as Onita's group would begin attacking Sayama before throwing him back. And then Onita would try to throw Tiger Mask out again, but he would end up doing a 619 between the ropes and coming back and delivering a kick to Onita, which would send Onita out of the ring, as Tiger Mask's group would end up taking advantage of that and begin attacking Onita. This would happen a couple more times until Tiger Mask would get on the apron and get back in the ring with Onita spitting green mist in his eyes and then placing him in a figure four leg lock before turning it into a single leg grab with Tiger Mask knocking Onita out of the ring. And then the Great Sasuke would take this opportunity to deliver a flying drop kick off the apron onto Onita. Onita would end up getting thrown back in the ring when his group would end up just running in and begin attacking Sayama. Onita would end up grabbing a hold of Tiger Mask, with Yaguchi taking a very light swing with the barbed wire bat, and then Tiger Mask would move out of the way with Yaguchi hitting Onita's shoulder, and then Tiger Mask would end up hitting Onita with the tombstone pile driver, and then try for a headbutt and give the 55-year-old Satoru Sayama some credit for flying as far as he did to kind of hit Onita here, before Sayama, Tiger Mask, would end up picking up the barbed wire bat and hitting Onita with it for the win. So Tiger Mask defeats Onita here. Sayama would end up asking to shake Onita's hand to end their long-time unspoken feud between the New Japan Junior Heavyweight Ace and the All Japan Junior Heavyweight Ace. Onita would end up looking in the crowd and milking it before shaking Sayama's hand, and then once again spit green mist in his eyes as both Onita and Sayama's sides would rush the ring and begin brawling, as Onita would get on top of Sayama and begin trying to pull off the Tiger Mask before eventually just throwing him out of the ring, with Sasuke grabbing Sayama and helping him out, as Onita would celebrate and throw his water around as if he had won. So Onita, I made mention, he has a resurgence going on here because of the Akebono feud. Well, now you add in this original Tiger Mask Satoru Sayama feud as well. Two completely different wrestlers that Onita is feuding with, but both are big time hits. The crowd is into both of these feuds for two completely different promotions, and Onita, 6 months ago, he was, just doing a nostalgic act. Oh, I'm having a barbed wire match, and, this is a bad match, but, whatever, and I'm gonna do my Onita theater afterwards, and, just kind of live off what I was a couple years ago, or, 10 plus years ago, and the nostalgia. Well, now, he's kind of still doing it, but now it's working with the current fan base. The crowd really cares about his feuds with both Akebono and Sayama, and Onita is gonna get more and more popular, even though he's acting like a heel in both of these feuds.
Ryuji Yamakawa would wrestle his last Corrigan Hall show on June 21st for Big Japan. Can you go over his match as well as the title matches on this show?
So on this show, there's going to be a fans bring the weapons death match between Takashi Sasaki and Shadow WX going up against Ryuji Ito and Ryuji Yamakawa. The match would start with Yamakawa and Sasaki doing dueling keyboard shots to one another before Ito would get tagged in and slam Sasaki on a kimono doll and then dump thumbtacks on Sasaki. Yamakawa would get tagged in and bring in some bread that he would eat and then hit Sasaki over the head with it. And then Sasaki would tag in Shadow WX, who would come in and put Yamakawa in the corner and put tape in his mouth and then step back and let go of the tape, which would snap right into Yamakawa's mouth. Shadow WX would then tag in Sasaki, who would end up hitting Yamakawa with a plastic baseball bat before pulling a badminton racket, which was a weapon I had bought from a dollar store and brought to Japan for this match, with Sasaki hitting Yamakawa over the head with it. And to be honest, it's the whole reason I'm talking about this match, just so I can get over the fact that I brought a weapon that they used on this show. Eventually, Ito would get tagged in and grab a PlayStation 2 and charge at Sasaki and hit him over the head with it, and then hit Shadow WX with the Dragon Splash, with Sasaki making the save as Yamakawa would try for a Tiger Driver, but Shadow WX would reverse it very poorly, and then Shadow WX would pick up a keyboard and smash it over Yamakawa with keys flying all over the place. Shadow WX would then bring Yamakawa on the stage of Corrigan and suplex him and then bring him back in the ring, where Sasaki would place a chair in front of him and deliver a right leg kick to him, followed by Shadow WX hitting a brainbuster and then a lariat with the referee counting 3 and Yamakawa kicking out right afterwards. So I guess Yamakawa did not want to do this job but had to, so he kicks out at like 3.001. This would be Yamakawa's last Korakuen Hall show before retiring in July. Sadly, Yamakawa never really was able to come back to form after his injury in 2001. He's been wrestling for the past decade or so, but it's mostly been comedy. He's not the same wrestler that's having great matches or anything, and at this point, he's just kind of done with all the injuries, and he's going to retire and start up his own bar, and that's what he's still doing to this day. And then Yoshihito Sasaki would defend the Big Japan Strong Heavyweight title against Yuji Okabayashi, and this match would start with Okabayashi knocking Sasaki out of the ring, and they would begin forearming each other in the head. They would end up getting on the apron and continue striking one another until Okabayashi would knock Sasaki down and act like he was about to powerbomb Sasaki off the apron, but Sasaki would counter by picking Okabayashi up instead and hitting a Falcon Arrow on the apron as they would both fall to the outside of the ring. They would get back in the ring with Sasaki trying to put Okabayashi in a sleeper, but he would throw Sasaki over him down on the mat and then hit a German suplex on Sasaki that Sasaki would get right up and deliver a German to him, and then Okabayashi would end up getting right up and delivering a lariat to Sasaki. Okabayashi would then lift Sasaki up for a powerbomb, but his knee would buckle and he would fall to the mat while bringing Sasaki down with him. They would begin slapping one another as Okabayashi would run back for a lariat and be met with a lariat from Sasaki, and then Sasaki would begin giving elbows to Okabayashi and then begin headbutting Okabayashi with Yoshihito covered in blood from his own headbutts before hitting Okabayashi with the Fire Thunder and then finishing Okabayashi off with a lariat for the win. So this was an awesome spot here at the end with Okabayashi just getting headbutted the crap out of by Yoshihito Sasaki so heavily that Yoshihito is just bleeding as if he had just cut his whole forehead with a razor or something like that. I definitely recommend the entire run of Yoshihito Sasaki as strong heavyweight champion, as his whole run is match after match of matches like this where it's just awesome, especially really heated at the end, and the finishing sequence is always incredible. And then the main event's going to be Abdullah Kobayashi taking on Jackie Numazawa for the Big Japan Deathmatch title. Kobayashi's defending it here in a fluorescent light tubes Tokyo Skyscraper light tube deathmatch, and that pretty much is where two light tubes are in the corner and they're huge and look like the Tokyo Skyscraper. They would start the match by headbutting one another, thankfully not doing near the damage that Yoshihito had done to himself earlier. They would end up running into light tubes on both sides of the ring and then meet with a headbutt to one another before knocking each other down. Kobayashi would then grab light tubes and just toss it at Numazawa, with Numazawa returning the favor and just throwing them at Kobayashi. They would take turns hitting each other with light tubes until Kobayashi would send Numazawa into the first light tube skyscraper, with Numazawa then sending Kobayashi into the other one. Kobayashi would eventually pick up the stack of light tubes that he had brought in the ring, and Numazawa would deliver a dropkick, breaking them across Kobayashi. Numazawa would then end up delivering a Hurricane Rana and then powerbombing Kobayashi off the top through a stack of light tubes, and then Numazawa would pull out a chair with razor blades on it and pile drive Kobayashi into it. Numazawa would then try for another powerbomb off the top, but Kobayashi would turn it into a Hurricane Rana that is as good as Kobayashi can do when it comes to a Hurricane Rana, and then hit a German suplex, sending Numazawa into the razor blade chair. Kobayashi would then powerbomb Numazawa onto multiple stacks of light tubes, and then just begin grabbing on the light tubes left and just toss them at Numazawa's head, and then deliver an elbow drop for the win. So Kobayashi once again defends the Big Japan Deathmatch title. This is the best match that these two could possibly have done, with both of them being very limited and just so many light tubes being used. The razor chair blade was a really cool add-on to this match as a weapon that I have not seen before or since, but like I said, this match was okay, but it was as good as these two were going to be able to put on with one another, so that is a win for me.
Freedoms would run another Shinkiba show on June 28th with the Freedoms Army going up against Unchained in a hardcore match. Can you go over some of the noteworthy matches on this show?
So they would announce a crowd of 135 fans, so this is another disappointing number for Freedoms at Shinkiba. Right now, Freedoms is just not doing very well, especially with Jun Kasai out, and I actually attended this show and got front row seats, and I was the only one sitting front row. So when you're watching this show, you could see me sitting by myself, and I'm pretty much the only one in camera view while watching the show, so that's a fun little fact. The opening match is going to be the Brahman Brothers and Karate Brahman taking on Great Kajika, Ken Oka, and Ryuichi Sekini. This match would start with Karate Brahman playing his guitar and singing before the Kajika Army would have enough and just charge after the Brahman Brothers. Karate Brahman, he would end up charging at Ken Oka like only Karate Brahman can, with Ken Oka rolling him up, and then the Brahman Brothers would have to make the save for their cousin. Eventually, one of the Brahman Brothers would end up hitting the ring and throwing powder in Kajika's face, and following that up by throwing it in Sekini and Oka's face, and then things would end up getting vulgar as Karate Brahman would end up pulling out a banana and going for Ai Miyazaki, but Kajika would manage to make the save and grab the banana and shove it in Karate Brahman's mouth, as Sekini and Oka, they would end up both picking up the both Brahman brothers and delivering kamikazes to them. Oka and Sekini would end up going after Karate Brahman, but he would distract them by blowing bubbles in the air, but Kajika would not be fazed by the bubbles and grab Karate and put him in a chokehold, and the referee would end up having to call for the bell to give the win to the Kajika Army. Afterwards, Miyazaki would end up getting on top of Karate Brahman and just begin punching and choking him for pretty much trying to sexually assault her during the match. And then the main event's going to be Takashi Sasaki and Mama Sasaki taking on Tomohiko Hama and Masashi Takeda in a hardcore match. They would start by brawling all around ringside. Eventually, Takashi and Hama, they would end up going at it, with Takashi placing Hama's head down on a chair, and then placing a chair over his head and smashing it down repeatedly. Eventually, it would end up coming down to Mammoth and Takeda, with Takeda being cheered despite being the heel. Mammoth and Takashi, they would end up hitting a double Mammoth home run, and then Mammoth would end up hitting a power bomb on Takeda, and following that up with a 29 years old on a stack of chairs for the win. So Mammoth and Takashi end up getting the win. Afterwards, Jun Kasai would come to the ring and hit the ropes to show that he is ready to enter the deathmatch tournament in August. Then the Brahman Brothers, they would end up coming to the ring and announcing that Brahman Key would be entering the deathmatch tournament as well, as this year is going to be the biggest deathmatch tournament with 14 people involved in it. Afterwards, it would be revealed that Mammoth had suffered a neck injury and that he's going to miss the next 6 months, and like I talked about earlier, he's going to be forced to vacate the WEW Hardcore Tag Team titles with Kamui.
Atsushi Onita would return to 0-1 on July 8th at Corrigan Hall, with his Jado Army facing off against Akebono with the 064 group. Can you talk about who were in these groups and go over the match?
So I went over earlier how Onita and Yuguchi had formed the Jado Army. Well, since then they've added Hideki Osaka to the group, and that's going to be the core three pretty much for the next 5 years or so to this group. Others would come and go, but these are going to be the consistent three members, and they're going to take on the 064 group, which would consist of Akebono, who's the leader, as well as Minio Fujita and Takuya Sugawara in a scramble bunkhouse street fight death match. This match would start with Osaka and Yuguchi, as well as Fujita and Sugawara rushing to the ring to grab the barbed wire bat set up on a chair in the ring, when Osaka would manage to grab it first, but Onita would already have a bat with him, and he would end up going after Akebono in the crowd with it. Eventually, they would end up getting back in the ring, with both Onita and Akebono having barbed wire bats in their hands, with Akebono knocking Onita's bat away, but Yuguchi would attack Akebono from behind, and then Onita would focus on Sugawara, who he would end up taking in the crowd and smashing his head up against the wall at Corrigan, and then pile drive him through a table on the outside, and then Onita would end up getting back in the ring, and Akebono would end up grabbing grabbing him and lifting him up for a chokeslam, Onita would spit red mist in the air, mostly missing Akebono this time. So this was a botched job by Onita, pretty much missing Akebono completely in the face. Akebono would then grab a hold of Onita as Fujita would pick up a barbed wire bat and swing at Onita, but Onita would move out of the way and Fujita would accidentally end up hitting Akebono instead, followed by Onita spitting red mist in Fujita's face, this time successfully, and then Onita would end up hitting a Thunderfire powerbomb on Fujita. As Akebono would go to make the save, Onita would move out of the way and Akebono would accidentally land on Fujita, and then Onita would end up picking up Fujita and hitting him with a Thunderfire powerbomb to get the win over Fujita. This is to set up the Onita-Akebono singles match, which is going to be an exploding barbed wire death match at the Yokohama Bunka Gym in August. Afterwards, Akebono would end up grabbing Onita by his legs and going after him, but Onita would manage to escape. So right now, this Akebono and Onita feud is really hot, and it is, Onita is also feuding with Sayama as well, but this Akebono feud is really the top priority to Onita. It's what's catching most fans' interest and attention here, and it's going to lead to a successful Yokohama Bunka Gym show as a result.
The Apache Army would begin their 16-man tournament to determine a new WEW champion on July 25th, with Kanemura and Kuroda facing off in the main event. Can you talk about the match and what led to the match needing to be stopped?
So this is going to be a 16-man tournament called the Takeover the Independent Tournament, with all the first-round matches taking place on this show. The only real noteworthy match, though, is Kanemura versus Kuroda in the main event. This match would start with Kanemura delivering a Hurricane Rana to Kuroda, sending him out of the ring. Kuroda would end up bringing Kanemura out of the ring with him, and they would end up going into the crowd, up into the bleachers to Shinkiba, with Kuroda smashing Kanemura's head into the wall. They would end up getting back to ringside with Kanemura picking up a chair and hitting Kuroda in the back with it, and then throwing him back in the ring and begin delivering chops to Kuroda's chest. Well, Kuroda would end up coming back and charging at Kanemura with a lariat. Kuroda would end up charging at Kanemura with a lariat, but Kanemura would end up delivering an enziguri to Kuroda, but as Kanemura would end up coming down, he would end up falling on his shoulder and be unable to get up, as the referee would be forced to stop the match and reward the win to Kuroda. Kanemura is obviously very injured here. He would end up being taken to the hospital where he'd be given x-rays, and it would turn out that his shoulder had been dislocated and he had also a fractured collarbone. Kanemura's body clearly breaking down here, as he's going to end up being out several more months as a result after just coming back the month prior. So, like I said, Kanemura is in bad shape here. Hasegawa actually was thinking that this might be the end, talking about Kanemura might not be able to ever come back and have to retire, but Kanemura would manage to come back, and as we'll go over here in a second, a lot faster than you would think, even with the severity of this injury, or the injuries that he had suffered.
The Kojika Army would disband following the Freedom's July 26th show in Shinkiba. Can you talk about this main event match for the show?
Yes, they would announce a crowd of 161 fans here, so the number is slightly up, especially compared to last month. The big draw here is the farewell to the Kojika Army. Great Kojika and Antonio Honda, they're going to be teaming up for the final time, and they're going to wrestle in the main event here against Jintaro and Keizo Masuda. In this match, Jintaro and Kojika, they would start off by fighting on the outside, with Masuda delivering a running lariat to Kojika. Eventually, Jintaro, he would end up facing off against Antonio Honda, and Jintaro would end up getting Honda in the sharpshooter, when the Braun brothers, who've had a long history with the Kojika Army, they would come out, and with one still covered in Indian ink, and they would begin attacking Kojika. Eventually, they would end up being cleared out, and Jintaro and Honda, they would square off, with Jintaro putting Honda in an abdominal stretch, when Kojika, after facing off against the Braun brothers, he would come in to make the save, and then put the claw on both Jintaro and Masuda, with Jintaro managing to get away and grab a hold of Kojika, and Matsuda would end up charging and missing and hitting Jintaro accidentally, followed by Kojika hitting an Iron Claw slam on Jintaro, and then Ai Miyazaki, she would end up hitting a dive off the top, and then Antonio Honda, he would end up getting on the top rope and delivering a fist drop off the turnbuckle on Jintaro to get the win. So Kojika and Antonio Honda get the win in the final Kojika Army match. Afterwards, the Kajika Army would say goodbye to Freedoms, as this would be the last time, like I said, that they're going to be a part of the promotion. They're still going to participate, and Honda and Kajika are still going to be a part every so often, but no longer a faction. And Ai Miyazaki and the other members, Ken Oka, Ryuichi Sekini, they're pretty much gone at this point in Freedoms. Kajika Army had been around since the first couple months, January 2010, about 4 months into the promotion. Kajika turned heel, and the Kajika Army became the number one heel group in the promotion. They had a bunch of members join them, the Brahmin brothers. The whole first Korakuen Hall show was based around them, and at this point, the whole gimmick has run its course. And like I said, Kajika and Honda, they're going to participate a little bit, but it's going to be pretty much opening match comedy, which the Kajika Army had sadly fallen to this past year. So anyway.
Atsushi Onita would run his own show on August 3rd at the Shinjuku face, with the Jado Army again facing off against 064 to continue the Onita versus Akebono feud. Can you go over this match?
So on this show, the main event's going to be a rematch of the 01 July show, where the Jado Army, Atsushi Onita, Hideki Osaka, and Ichiro Uguchi are taking on 064, which consists of Akebono, Minio Fujita, and Takuya Sugawara. This is going to be another scramble bunkhouse street fight death match with the barbed wire bat laid in the middle of the ring with it set on a chair. This match would start with all 6 wrestlers going to the ring, with Fujita jumping on the chair and delivering a dive, sending himself into Osaka. Everyone would end up exiting the ring as Onita and Akebono would brawl in the crowd in the background of this non-mobile hard cam for this show. So there's only one camera set up in the back, and it's not moving at all regardless of where the wrestlers go. So you just see Onita and Akebono brawling in the crowd of Shinjuku face. Eventually, Onita would end up meeting up with Sugawara and pile driving him through a table on the outside. And then Akebono would come in the ring and fight off Uguchi and Hosaka and pick up Onita, who would spit blue mist in Akebono's face this time, and then smash a broken table piece over Akebono's head. And then Onita would hit Fujita with the Thunderfire powerbomb, but Sugawara would make the save this time. And then Hosaka and Uguchi, they would come in and focus on Akebono, with Akebono knocking Uguchi down and then choke slamming Hosaka, and then giving Hosaka a splash for the win. This was a very similar match to the match a month ago, so pretty much the same style. The only difference is the Onita team got a win on the road at 01, and now the 01 team is getting a win on the road on the Onita show. And again, this is just to set up the Onita versus Akebono match that's coming up here at the end of the month.
Freedoms would run 2 shows on August 5th in Sapporo, one being a regular show and one being a deathmatch show. Jintaro would end up being taken to the hospital after his match on the first show. Can you go over both shows and what happened to Jintaro on the first show and what did it mean for him?
Yeah, so Freedoms is going to have back-to-back shows here, with the first show being a non-deathmatch show and the second show being all death matches. The first show is going to draw an announced crowd of 216 fans, with Jintaro and Asami Kodaka facing off against one another in a singles match in the semi-main event. It would not take long before they would end up finding themselves outside the ring, fighting into the seats, before getting back in the ring, and Kodaka would kick Jintaro in the head, and Jintaro would randomly walk out and fall out of the ring and begin holding his head in a spot that, if I had to guess, would end up changing his life. Jintaro would manage to continue on as Kodaka would go outside and deliver a running drop kick and then throw Jintaro back in the ring, and the two would begin striking one another in the face. Jintaro would end up getting out of the ring for a break when Kodaka would deliver a tope to him, and the two would begin striking one another as Kodaka would end up sitting Jintaro on a chair and delivering a kick to the head again, and then hit a running dive from the second floor back to the chair to knock Jintaro down in a pretty cool spot. Jintaro would try to get back in the ring and collapse, but end up shooting back up as the referee would count to 19, and Jintaro would roll back in the ring right before the count out. Kodaka would put Jintaro in the sharpshooter, with Jintaro managing to reverse it and placing Kodaka in the sharpshooter. Jintaro would then get Kodaka outside and place him in the sharpshooter outside the ring. They would end up getting back in the ring with time running down as Jintaro would hit a power slam and continue to try and pin Kodaka, with Kodaka rolling him up and Jintaro kicking out as the 45-minute time limit would expire. So they wrestled this match like they knew they were going to go 45 25, so it was slow in a lot of spots. This probably would have been a great match if it would have just gone 20, but again, they're trying to get Jintaro over as this classic worker that can have these great matches, and Kodaka's a great worker, so hey, let's see what they can do and give him 45. Well, after the match, Jintaro, he would end up walking to the back, and while he was backstage, he would just collapse. And he would cite that it was due to the pain of the match that he would collapse. Well, they would take Jintaro to the hospital thinking he had just suffered some type of injury during the match, when it would be revealed at the hospital that he had actually suffered a stroke due to a blood clot that had gone to his brain. And like I said, if I had to guess, it was one of the early spots where Kodaka had kicked him in the head that caused it. But, no one really knows. So it looks like Jintaro's career might possibly be over due to the severity of this injury. He would manage to come back to the ring a little over a year and a half later, although he honestly never would really be the same wrestler. They could no longer even try to pretend to portray him as this classic worker or anything like that they had been doing since the beginning of Freedom. So I actually hung out with Jintaro about 11 months after his stroke, about 1 month after he made his first public appearance, and I was hanging out with him and a couple other wrestlers at Naoshi Sano's bar, and I honestly didn't think he would be able to come back, and that was 11 months after the injury, because he just seemed all over the place. He, 1 minute he's crying, next minute he's laughing, the next moment he's crying, bawling very loudly, and like it's awkward, and I didn't know if there was something that was said, but it just seemed random. It just came out of nowhere. He's just bawling out loud, crying. And I was actually next to one of his friends who had told me, hey, he is not the same person since this stroke. He is not all there mentally, but hey, he told me, I had another wrestler friend that suffered a similar injury, a similar stroke, and he passed away. So I don't care that he's not the same person. He's alive. That's all. I have my friend still. That's all I really care about. But, like I said, just being around him, it was very apparent that he was suffering the side effects of having a stroke, just being kind of all over the place emotionally. And, it's been 7 years since the stroke. He was able to come back and wrestle about a year and a half after the stroke, and he's been wrestling ever since, and he's nowhere even close to being the same wrestler. And like I haven't been the biggest fan of Jintaro as far as in-ring work the last couple years of what we've been going over, 2009, 2010, 2011, but he was okay. He could at least portray this classic worker. Well, ever since he's come back into the ring last 5 years since he's come back, he is not trying to portray a classic worker. He is not the same worker, but he, as long as he can have straight regular matches and sometimes a hardcore death match, he's fine with that. And I'm sure he's just happy that he can continue his career after suffering such a serious injury, a life-threatening injury. And so I'm just glad that Jintaro's okay, even though, like I said, he's definitely not the same worker that he was at this time period that we've been going over. And then the main event's gonna be Jun Kasai, Masashi Takeda, and Kenji Fukimoto taking on Takashi Sasaki, The Winger, and Kamui. This is gonna be Kasai's first match back in over 3 months since his injury. And he and Sasaki, they're going to start off by brawling outside the ring right away and going over to the moving truck that's used for the ring, where Kasai would end up hitting Sasaki in the head using the truck. Kasai would end up pile driving Sasaki on the entrance ramp, and then they would end up getting back in the ring, where Sasaki would focus on Kasai's injured knee. Kamui and Takeda, they would end up getting tagged in, with Kamui wrapping a chain around Takeda and try to throw him towards the rope, with Takeda coming back and slamming Kamui, with Fukimoto coming in to help double team Kamui before Kasai and the Winger would end up getting tagged in, and with Takashi Sasaki coming in to help the Winger, as the Winger would end up climbing up to the top. He would end up being met with a suplex by Kasai, and Kasai would end up finishing the Winger off with the Pearl Harbor Splash for the win. So the Unchained team get the win in Kasai's first match back. And then the second show would be an all-death match, Jun Kasai promoted show that would draw an announced crowd of 327 fans. So this is proof right here, even though everybody knows it, that the death matches draw more than the regular Freedom show. The first match, and all these matches are going to be tournament death matches in the first round. The first match is Hosaka taking on Toru Sugawara in a scramble bunkhouse death match. Hosaka, who's making his Freedom's debut here, he wears an FMW t-shirt for this match, and he would take Sugawara and throw him in the crowd. crowd before coming back in the ring and doing an FMW-style dueling chair spot before Hosaka would end up taking Sugawara back outside the ring and throwing him headfirst into the ring trucks way out outside the ring. They would end up getting back in the ring with Hosaka cutting Sugawara up with the barbed wire bat, and although Sugawara would manage to grab a hold of the barbed wire bat and hit Hosaka with it, he would end up being hit with the power bomb by Hosaka on the barbed wire bat for the win, so Hosaka advances. And then the next match is going to be a hardcore match between One Man Crew and Brahman Key. One Man Crew is an American wrestler who was a big FMW fan growing up. This match would start with Key jumping Crew to start the match and spitting water in his face and then nailing him with the street sign, with One Man Crew no-selling it. Crew would end up taking Key outside the ring into the crowd and begin choking him on the merch table before taking him over to the ring truck and hitting an F5 on Key into the ring truck before throwing him into the wall of the building. Key would try to escape by climbing up to the second floor with One Man Crew following him and trying to throw Key off the second floor balcony, but failing to do so. Eventually they would end up getting back in the ring, and Brahman Shu would come in to try and help his brother by spitting Indian ink, but would accidentally end up missing One Man Crew and spraying Key with it instead. Crew would look to finish Key off, but Crew would end up beginning to argue with the referee as Shu would take this opportunity to come in and rub Indian ink all over his face to give the impression that he was actually Brahman Key, and Shu would end up getting picked up by Crew for a chokeslam, but Shu would end up spitting Indian ink in his face and roll him up for the win. So even though Brahman Shu is getting the pin, Brahman Key ends up getting the advancement into the tournament. The next show would be Kamui taking on Matatsugu Shimizu, who is a wrestler for the small secret-based promotion, in a street fight death match. Shimizu would jump Kamui right away, and they begin brawling all over the building before getting back in the ring, and Shimizu would end up wrapping Kamui's chain around him, who would try to hang Kamui, but Kamui would manage to deliver a Pele kick and grab the chain and begin hanging Shimizu, while Kamui's outside and Shimizu's inside the ring, as the referee would end up calling for the match and giving Kamui the win, so Kamui advances. And then Asami Kodaka would take on Kinji Fukimoto in a thumbtacks deathmatch. Kodaka would set Fukimoto on the chair on the outside and do his climb up to the second floor spot again, come all the way down, except this time Kodaka would end up diving at Fukimoto and Fukimoto would move out of the way, and Kodaka would end up wiping out into the chairs instead. Fukimoto would end up dumping thumbtacks in the ring and delivering a spine buster to Kodaka, but Kodaka would end up knocking Fukimoto down on the thumbtacks and laying a ladder over Fukimoto, and then delivering a double knee drop followed by a kick to the head for the win. So now Kodaka has advanced to the second round. And then Masashi Takeda would take on Hiroki in a barbed wire board death match. Hiroki here has taken Jintaro's spot after Jintaro had suffered his stroke. They would end up throwing one another into the barbed wire board, and then they would fight on the apron with Takeda hitting a U-crash off the apron. They would end up getting back in the ring with Hiroki trying for a trans-raid kick, but Takeda would block that kick and deliver a German suplex on the barbed wire board for the win. And then the main event's going to be Jun Kasai taking on Takashi Sasaki in a weapons death match. They would brawl around ringside and cut up in one another before Sasaki would end up powerbombing Kasai on the barbed wire board. Sasaki would then dump thumbtacks over him, and they would end up taking turns backdropping one another into the thumbtacks. Kasai would end up grabbing a ladder and climbing up it, with Sasaki getting up the ladder as well, and they would end up fighting on top of the ladder, with Sasaki grabbing a light tube from the ceiling and breaking it over Kasai's head, and then suplexing Kasai off the ladder, but Kasai would no-sell it and get up right away and knock Sasaki down with a lariat, and then Kasai would end up hitting a Pearl Harbor splash and finishing Sasaki off with a reverse Tiger Driver on the thumbtacks for the win. So 6 wrestlers advance into the tournament. Like I said, Winger and Masada get buys, so now the second show is going to have 8 wrestlers in the second round of the biggest deathmatch tournament that the Freedoms has ever held.
Freedoms would then run the second round of their deathmatch tournament on August 19th, with Jun Kasai going up against Masashi Takeda. Can you go over this match and all the tournament matches on the show for us?
So all these are going to be second round tournament matches. The first match is going to be a Falls Count Anywhere street fight death match with Hoteki Osaka taking on Brahmin Ki. Osaka would rush in the ring and begin giving Death Valley bombs repeatedly to Brahmin Ki, with Ki still managing to kick out. Eventually, Osaka would take Ki into the crowd and up into the top of the area, where he would end up chopping Ki, and Ki would go flying down rows and rows of seats. They would end up getting back in the ring with Osaka beginning to choke Ki when slime would come out of Ki's mouth, but Osaka would just take the slime and begin rubbing it in Ki's face. Osaka would then take some wooden steps and try to suplex Ki on them, but Ki would manage to escape and drop Osaka face first into them. Ki would then climb up the steps and jump onto Osaka off the steps. They would end up getting back in the ring with Ki holding Osaka as Shu would bring a pie in the ring, but Osaka would move out of the way and Ki would end up getting a face full of pie, as Osaka would then throw Shu out of the ring, hit a last ride powerbomb on Ki, with Shu grabbing the referee's leg to break the count. Osaka would then be really upset at Nikon Lee for not counting 3, as Shu would shove a pie in his own face and trade spots with Ki, as Osaka would then try to pick up Shu for a Death Valley bomb, but Shu would manage to escape and then spit Indian ink in Osaka's face and roll him up for the win. This was a really entertaining match and probably my favorite Hideki Osaka singles match even. But Brahmin Ki now advances into the semifinals. The winger would take on Sami Kodaka in a chain death match, and right away the winger would kick Kodaka low at the start of the match and do his signature roll up for the win in just 3 seconds, with Nikon Lee afterwards deciding that the chain was not attached all the way as it came loose during the roll up, and she's going to restart the match, and this is just a miscarriage of justice for the winger, who had rightfully pinned Kodaka 1, 2, 3, but she ends up restarting the match, and the winger would end up ripping the chain off almost right away again, as Kodaka would end up just having to place the winger in a rest spot, as Nikon Lee would end up just grabbing the chain and just taping it up to finally stay on both of them. Kodaka would end up wrapping the chain around the winger and delivering a super kick, and then placing the winger in a sharpshooter for the win. So the winger was totally screwed here out of being able to defend his deathmatch trophy. So Kodaka now advances. Then MASADA is going to take on Kamui in a barbed wire board deathmatch. MASADA would be first to go into the barbed wire board, as Kamui would end up delivering a tilt-a-whirl, sending MASADA into it, and then dropping a ladder onto him. And then MASADA would begin using a chair on Kamui, and then placing him on a ladder and coming down with an elbow, with Kamui moving out of the way, and Kamui would then use a ladder to dive onto MASADA. Kamui would then try to deliver a Hurricane Rana, but MASADA would catch him and powerbomb Kamui into the barbed wire board, and then MASADA would end up placing a ladder over his head, but Kamui would move out of the way as MASADA would try to hit Kamui with the ladder, and Kamui would then take a chair and smash the ladder, and then set up 2 ladders and place a table on top of them, and then climb up to the top, try for a swanton dive, but end up missing it, and MASADA would end up just finishing Kamui off with the Death Valley bomb off the top onto the barbed wire board to advance to the semifinals. And then the main event's going to be Masahisa Takeda taking on Jun Kasai in a fluorescent light tubes deathmatch. They would waste no time using the light tubes to cut open one another. Kasai would end up slamming Takeda and placing a light tube over him and going for a Pearl Harbor Slash, but Takeda would get his knees up, and then Takeda would grab a bucket of thumbtacks and pour them all over him, and then deliver a German suplex, followed by kicking Kasai in the face with his knee, and then placing a light tube on the mat and trying to suplex Kasai again before delivering a reverse Tiger Driver on the light tube without the light tube really breaking on Kasai. Kasai would give a great facial here with one of his contact in and just looking dead laying there, but Takeda would end up placing a stack of light tubes on Kasai, who would end up just getting up and coming up from behind and smashing them over Takeda's head, and with Takeda no-selling it before Kasai would end up hitting a reverse Tiger Driver and then a Pearl Harbor Splash on Takeda for the win, with Kasai showing his thumbtack stuck in his hand for good measure. So this took a while to get going, but the end sequence was really good, with Takeda slowly trying to turn himself into a younger version of Kasai, but Takeda still is unable to defeat his mentor after 4 years of them fighting at least 1 or 2 matches every year. Kasai has always defeated Takeda every time they fought, because Kasai has more experience and he's the bigger star at this point still.
Atsushi Onita and Akebono would face off against each other on August 26th at the Yokohama Bunka Gym in a no-ropes exploding barbed wire death match. Can you go over this match and what took place following the match?
So this is going to be the big Atsushi Onita Akebono singles match that 0-1 has been building up for the last 4 months or so. Ribera Steakhouse, which has worked very closely with Akebono around this time, they are a big-time sponsor for this show. Otherwise, I don't think 0-1 would have been able to run the Yokohama Bunka Gym, a 5,000-seat building, but they had to run a decent-sized building to be able to have this no-ropes exploding barbed wire match. Onita would begin striking Akebono early on in the match when Akebono would just begin using E-Honda-like quickness and deliver sumo palm blocks, knocking Onita into the exploding barbed wire for the first time in 9 years since his match against the great Sasuke and Michinoku Pro. Akebono would then end up taking Onita and just throwing him outside the ring onto the barbed wire boards that had been set around ringside. The referee would start to count Onita out as Akebono would end up just tossing the referee down and grabbing Onita and taking him into the crowd, where Onita would end up grabbing a ring bell and using an Akebono to get away from him. After this, there would be just a lot of walking around before Onita would end up grabbing 3 seats and just hitting Akebono with them before some more walking around. Eventually, Akebono would then end up charging at Onita, with Onita moving out of the way, and Akebono would end up going over the guardrail of what is now exploding barbed wire boards outside the ring. So earlier when Onita got thrown outside the ring onto them, they did not explode, but now Akebono goes into them, and there is a huge explosion. Onita would then end up grabbing a barbed wire bat, but Akebono would end up grabbing Onita and lifting him up when Onita would spit red mist in Akebono's face, and then Onita would end up hitting an oppressive-looking suplex and then throw Akebono into the exploding barbed wire. Onita would then take Akebono, and both would end up going into the exploding barbed wire together in a very coerced-looking spot. They both would end up getting up, and Onita would end up spitting mist once again in Akebono's face, and then Akebono would just be done with this and done with Onita at this point, as he would end up just shoving Onita into the exploding barbed wire and then hitting Onita with a splash, with Onita managing to kick out right after the 3 count to try and protect himself. So Akebono ends up getting the win. Afterwards, Akebono would do a sumo celebration pose when Onita would crawl over to him and set a fireball right in Akebono's face to Onita chants, as this would really just be the beginning of the Onita and Akebono feud. So Akebono picks up the win, but Onita ends up getting himself more over in the process. And like I said, this feud is going to continue for another year because there's definitely more mileage, as this is quickly picking up and becoming a very heated and very popular feud that 0-1 is going to try and milk as much as possible here the next couple months.
The Apache Army would run at Shinkiba on August 27th, with the 10-man match getting even bigger with an Apache Army member making a surprise appearance. Can you talk about this match on the show?
So this show is going to have the second round of the Takeover the Independent tournament, with none of the tournament matches really being that interesting. The most interesting match on the show is a non-tournament match with Daisaku Shota, Kotaro Nasu, and Shinsuke Jet Wakataka taking on the Apache Demolition team of Tomohiko Hashimoto, Shoshi Ichimaya, Rikiya Fudo, and Kinjo Nishimura, with the Apache Demolition team just attacking the independent wrestlers right away and just laying waste to them, as the referee would end up just throwing the match out, as Hashimoto would end up getting on the mic and calling Kanemura to the ring. Kanemura in street clothes would come out with Tetsuhiro Kuroda and Naoshi Sano, and they would end up agreeing to have a match against the Apache Demolition, a 16-man match. So I talked about how Kanemura was going to come back way sooner than he should with the extent of his injury, and here he is 1 month later in a match. Everyone would end up getting their spots in before Kanemura would end up coming in and with one arm begin delivering chops to Nishimura and flipping him over and delivering a kick to his back and then the front, before Hashimoto would end up coming in and going after Kanemura, with Miyamoto hitting the ring, and not even one of the 16 people in the match would be able to make the save, as Kanemura would end up sweeping Nishimura's leg at the same time as Miyamoto would end up hitting a lariat, and Kanemura would end up getting the pinfall over Nishimura. Afterwards, Kanemura would do a one-arm team no respect dance with the rest of his teammates in the match, as Kanemura would end up being out for 2 more months before coming back to the ring for real. So this was, he just kind of got by very limited here, kind of hidden by a 16-man match. But, the next 2 months he will take time off to recover, to come back, be able to come back for good.
Freedoms would run their biggest show ever at Corrigan Hall on August 27th, with a 2-year-long feud culminating in the main event. Can you talk about the noteworthy matches on the show and how this show did?
So they would announce a crowd of 1,089 fans, which is a success. The goal was 1,000. They were able to achieve that a lot better than what they did in May when they couldn't even hit 600. But you add in the fact that this is a deathmatch show. Jun Kasai's on it. He's probably going to take on MASADA in a feud that's been built up for 2 years. And if Kasai doesn't win this tournament, he says he's going to retire. All those factors add in, and you have a very successful show as a result. The opening match is going to be Riki Fuji, one-man crew, and Kin 45 teaming up to take on Matsusugu Shimizu, Hiroki, and Suzumu. This is Riki's return for the first time in 6 months to Freedoms for the one-time shot, and Shimizu would end up offering Riki some hard liquor before the match to drink, with Riki obliging. Shimizu would end up using that liquor to pour on Kin 45's head during the match. Riki would end up coming in and hitting a kamikaze on Shimizu, and then tagging in one-man crew, who would end up trying to splash Shimizu, but he would end up getting his knees up and then tag in Suzumu, who would launch himself off the top with a splash on crew, but one-man crew would end up coming back and hitting a backdrop followed by a praying powerbomb and then a falcon arrow, and then finishing Suzumu with a moonsault for the win. And then in the first tournament match, MASADA's going to take on Brahman Key in a homeless man death match. This would become a staple for the Brahman brothers at Corrigan Hall, as garbage bags are all around ringside. Key would end up grabbing a garbage bag of empty cans and just smashing MASADA in the face with it, before they would end up fighting outside, as Shu would end up jumping on a bicycle and going after MASADA on it, but MASADA would end up just clotheslining Shu off the bike and then throwing the bike at him. They would end up getting back in the ring with Key putting a cone on his leg, and he would end up just giving MASADA kicks with it before MASADA would end up catching him and delivering a dragon screw leg whip and then dropping Key ass first on the cone. Key would then end up grabbing a hold of MASADA, as Shu is going to go for the Indian ink spot again, spitting it in his face, but MASADA, like everyone else, ends up moving out of the way, and then Shu would end up spitting Key in the face with the Indian ink. MASADA would then end up hitting a powerbomb on Key, but Shu would manage to make the save and then put Indian ink on his face, and they would do the switch spot again, but as MASADA would end up picking Shu up, Shu would escape and go to spit Indian ink in MASADA's face. MASADA, though, would end up picking up a pig's head and blocking himself from the ink with it. Key would end up trying to hit MASADA with a pie, but MASADA would manage to grab it and end up shoving it in both their faces, and then powerbomb Key on the bike for the win, so MASADA advances to the finals of the tournament. And then Jun Kasai is going to take on Asami Kodaka in a ladder razor blade death match. They would fight in the crowd to start off, where Kodaka would end up setting Kasai on a chair and do his long distance sprint before diving at Kasai, but Kasai would manage to move out of the way and Kodaka would wipe out. Kasai would end up hitting a powerbomb on Kodaka off the top onto a light tube set up on a ladder, and then Kasai would end up trying to hit a reverse tiger driver on the razor blades, but Kodaka would end up escaping, and Kasai would end up hitting a spear, sending Kodaka into the razor blades, followed by delivering a German suplex with Kodaka kicking out at one and getting up right away and delivering a kick to the head, but Kodaka would end up charging at Kasai and be met with a lariat, and then Kasai would end up hitting a reverse tiger driver for the win, so Kasai ends up getting the easy win over Kodaka to advance to the final. So he's now going to face off against MASADA for the third year in a row, this time in the finals, and like I said, if he doesn't win, he will have to retire, given his word. And then there's going to be a non-tournament match on this show where Hito, he's going to appear in Freedoms for the first time. He's going to team up with Jackie Numazawa and Kenji Fukimoto, so kind of this outside Unchained group, while it's a Jun Kasai promoted show. They're going to take on the Freedoms team of Takashi Sasaki, the Winger, and Kamui in a scramble bunkhouse death match, where everyone would end up brawling around ringside to start, with Hito bringing back his scissors and using them to stab Sasaki in the head, and then hitting Sasaki with a barbed wire bat, followed by hitting Kamui with it. Fukimoto would end up grabbing Sasaki as Hito would come in and try to clothesline Sasaki, but Sasaki would move out of the way and Hito would accidentally end up nailing Fukimoto instead, as Kamui would end up knocking Hito out of the ring, and Sasaki would end up finishing Fukimoto off with a Michinoku Driver 2 on the barbed wire bat for the win. And then in the main event, it's going to be the finals of the deathmatch tournament between Jun Kasai and MASADA in a no-canvas glassboard deathmatch. So this is the first no-canvas deathmatch where they have taken the canvas off the ring and they're going to wrestle on the hardwood floor. And again, if Jun Kasai loses this match and loses the tournament, he has vowed he's going to retire after having lost to MASADA the previous 2 years in the tournament. This match would start with Kasai very early on, sending MASADA into the corner through the first glassboard, with MASADA's shoulder getting deeply cut up right away. It's nasty nasty looking cut in the shoulder, with some of the glass just sticking right into his shoulder. So right away, Masada is cut up. Kasai would end up pulling out a table and placing Masada on it, and then trying to climb up to the top to send him through it, but Masada would manage to get up, and they would begin fighting on the apron, with Masada picking Kasai up and hitting a Death Valley bomb off the apron through the table. Masada would then slam Kasai on the broken glass in the ring, and then Masada would begin cutting Kasai open with a blade in the forehead, and then stick his skewers in Kasai's head and place him in the camel clutch, followed by another Death Valley bomb. Masada would then begin taking the boards out of the ring and place the other glass board where the wooden boards had been, and in an insane looking spot, especially for the time, Masada would powerbomb Kasai through the glass board, sending him down into the ring. This is an awesome spot, especially, like I said, the very first time you see it. Kasai would end up getting back into the ring as the fans are screaming for Kasai here, as Masada would hit the Skullfucker Buster, which put Kasai away the year before, but Kasai would kick out this time. Kasai would end up fighting back and hitting a clothesline on Masada, and then take Masada's blade, and even though it had cost him the previous year's tournament, he would use it to cut his chest, and then hit a bad-looking reverse Tiger Driver, and then try to hit a Pearl Harbor Splash on Masada, but Masada would end up getting his knees up, and then Masada would end up trying to hit an implant DDT that Kasai would reverse and send Masada down into the boards, and then Kasai would end up placing a razor board over Masada and hit a Pearl Harbor Splash on Masada to get the win. So Kasai finally has defeated Masada and has won the deathmatch tournament for the first time, as the crowd is loudly chanting for Kasai in this epic scene. So this is a great match overall with great long-term planning, and this is pretty much the peak of the first couple of years of Freedoms. They probably don't see anything like this again in Freedoms until maybe Kasai and Takeda main eventing Corrigan Hall in 2018. And even though this is by no means a perfect match, like I said, this is pretty much a perfect story and the perfect climax to the Jun Kasai-Masada feud over the last 2 years, with Jun Kasai finally defeating Masada and winning the deathmatch tournament.
Megumi Kudo would hold her first special FMW reunion event on September 1st with Hayabusa and other FMW wrestlers called Happy Share With. Can you talk about what these events were?
Yeah, so I wanted to talk about these because they were really cool fan experiences for FMW fans. Megumi Kudo, she kind of picked up on the fact that, hey, FMW nostalgia is really hot right now. There is a fan base here that really still loves FMW. And, hey, she loves FMW. She retired in 97. At a young age, and, that was kind of her youth, and, she was a big-time celebrity at that time period, and, so she looks fondly back at it, and now FMW having been closed down for 10 years, she sees this market and realizes, hey, I can make some money, and I can have some fun hanging out with my friends, and so she invites Hayabusa, she invites Combat Toyota, one of her closest friends, and Ricky Fuji as well, to have this special FMW talk event reunion where, they hang out, tell stories, Hayabusa sings some songs, and it's a really cool experience. The fans get to take pictures afterwards. I didn't attend this show, but I attended one in June 2013, which was an awesome experience. It was Masato Tanaka, Megumi Kudo, and Hayabusa hanging out and talking, and it was Hayabusa's birthday party, and so Megumi Kudo gave Tanaka a cake, and so like I said, this was a really cool experience. I also wanted to quickly talk about around this time period in June 2012, I got to hang out with Hayabusa for the second time. The first time, I did get to have a good amount of time hanging out with him, but it was around a bunch of other people. In June 2012, I went to his concert, and it was one of the greatest nights of my life as far as being a wrestling fan, because after the concert, Hayabusa, I sat next to him, and I just talked to him for hours and throughout the night as we watched Hayabusa matches. So it was an awesome and amazing experience. With these wrestlers, Kudo, Hayabusa, Combat Toyota, their careers are over at this point. And Ricky Fuji, he wrestles only once a month, but he has a full-time job as well. And so it allows fans to meet these wrestlers, which they wouldn't have been able to in the 90s when all these wrestlers were, active and always busy and touring and stuff. Now with most of them retired or having full-time jobs, it at least gave me, someone, from America, the chance to be able to fly to Japan and hang out with all these wrestlers, Kudo, Combat Toyota, Riki Fuji, on separate days, as well as Hayabusa. And, like I said, it was one of the coolest moments just to get to talk to Hayabusa for hours while watching matches with him and getting to know so much. I learned so much from him that night, and then I hung out with him one more time a year later. This podcast probably wouldn't have been as good if it wasn't for me hanging out and just getting to just kind of pick Hayabusa's brain and just him telling stories and stuff, so that giving the opportunity for everybody that listens to these or watch these videos the chance to just get to know, not the most basic common FMW or Hayabusa knowledge things that everyone already knows. So this was really awesome for Megumi Kudo to be able to put something like this on. And like I said, these kind of fan events was pretty much just a dream for me back then, and I'm so glad I was able to go to them.
After running their biggest Corrigan Hall show ever, just 2 weeks later, Freedoms would then run their biggest show ever on September 9th in Iwate. Can you go over the show and why it did so well?
So this would be the most attended Freedom show ever at 1,382 fans. So just less than 1 month after drawing over 1,000 fans at Corrigan Hall, they end up drawing their biggest show ever, and this number would actually stay as their biggest number up until about 2018. So for a long time, this was the biggest attended Freedom show, and really the only explanation I have on why this show did so well is, one, Takashi Sasaki, this is his hometown, and so a lot of people want to come see him, the homegrown wrestler coming back to his hometown. And number two is they brought in the legends Riki Choshu and Tatsumi Fujinami to team up here. Tatsumi Fujinami had wrestled at the Corrigan Hall show back in May, so I wouldn't say he's necessarily this big draw, but Riki Choshu is definitely a draw, and I guess adding them together, definitely helped. But like I said, I think a big reason simply was just Takashi Sasaki coming back to his hometown, and on top of that, bringing in the legends here. On this show, the Great Sasuke, another draw, would team up with his Michinoku Pro partner, Keizan Numajiro, the former Yone Genjin. They're going to take on Jun Kasai and One Man Crew in a Fluorescent Light Tubes death match. Sasuke and Numajiro, they would end up grabbing One Man Crew and double teaming him by throwing him into the light tubes. And then Kasai would end up coming in, and Numajiro would end up headbutting a stack of light tubes, breaking them over Kasai's head and tagging in Sasuke. Sasuke would end up taking a stack of light tubes and placing them on the top rope and going up and trying to use them as more of a space to launch himself from the top, but of course he would end up falling and breaking the light tubes instead. Kasai would tag in One Man Crew, who would begin smashing light tubes over Sasuke, but Numajiro would come in and hit a double suplex on Crew, allowing Sasuke and Kasai to go at it, with Sasuke trying to hit a flying drop kick on Kasai with light tubes next to him, but Kasai would move out of the way and Sasuke would end up just kicking the light tubes instead. Numajiro would end up charging at Kasai with light tubes, but Kasai would move out of the way and Numajiro would run right into the corner with light tubes breaking across him, and then Kasai would end up hitting a Tiger Driver on Numajiro, followed by a Pearl Harbor Splash on Numajiro for the win. So Kasai and One Man Crew pick up the win here. And then the main event's going to be Takashi Sasaki and Hiroki going up against Riki Choshu and Tatsumi Fujinami. Takashi would end up squaring off against Choshu first before going at it against Fujinami, with Takashi knocking Fujinami down with a clothesline and then trying to place Fujinami in Choshu's Scorpion Deathlock, which would upset Choshu, who would act like he was going to come in the ring, which would cause Sasaki to think twice about it and then tried to kick Fujinami in the head, but Fujinami would catch Takashi's leg and deliver a dragon screw leg whip to him. Choshu would end up coming in, and Sasaki and Hiroki, they would double team him, with Choshu delivering a Riki Lariat to Hiroki and then placing him in the Scorpion Deathlock, with Takashi breaking the move, but Fujinami would come in and clear Takashi out of the ring, as Choshu would end up hitting a Riki Lariat once again on Hiroki, this time to pick up the win. This is the definition of a nothing match, much like the Fujinami versus Mr. Ganosuke match in 2008, where it's just the best of spots done very slowly, and although Choshu's moves still look good, Fujinami really is just completely washed at this point and unable to do anything that looks good in a match. At this point of his career, he's just done. Sasaki and Hiroki, they would end up hugging afterwards, and all the wrestlers on the show would come to the ring and be led by Sasaki to do a chant to end the show. So again, this is the most successful Freedom show ever as far as people attended. I don't know if it was the most profitable just because bringing in Riki Choshu and Fujinami and, Sasuke and some of the others, I'm sure, they paid a lot to get this show attended very well, but at the end of the day, this is the most attended Freedom show ever at this time, and like I said, this record would hold another 5 years or so until Kasai and Masashi Takeda would headline Corrigan Hall.
Freedoms would then run a special Jintaro Aid on September 17th in Shinkiba to help pay for Jintaro's hospital bills. Can you talk about some of the matches on this show?
So they would announce a crowd of 380 fans to sell out at Shinkiba, with all the proceeds going towards Jintaro's hospital bills. Since Jintaro is living at the hospital at this point, the bills are adding up, and so none of the wrestlers are actually getting paid for this show. All their paychecks are going towards trying to help Jintaro's hospital bills here. DDT would also participate on this show because of Jintaro's past with the promotion. Sanzahiro Takagi would participate, and a bunch of the other wrestlers would, and friends of Jintaro would also participate to give him support here. On this show, the Great Kajika would take on Antonio Honda in a battle of the Kajika Army members. Honda would end up trying to drop his elbow off the top turnbuckle, but Kajika would end up catching him with an iron claw, and then Honda would manage to break free, but Honda would then go for a strike, and Kajika would end up putting him in the Iron Claw again, and then delivering the Iron Claw slam for the win. So Great Kajika ends up getting the win in the battle of the Kajika Army members. And then the main events could be Takashi Sasaki, Tatsuhiro Takaiwa, and Sanzahiro Takagi taking on Brahman Shu, Brahman Ki, and Brahman Keizo, who is Keizo Masuda portraying a Brahman brother on this show. And they're going to have Karate Brahman in their corner as well. And this match would start with the Brahman brothers spitting water in their opponent's face, and they would begin brawling outside the ring, where Takagi would end up grabbing Karate Brahman and taking him up the bleachers, where one of the Brahman brothers would come over with a bucket of water, but Takagi would end up dumping that bucket of water over his head. Takagi would then bring Karate Brahman back in the ring and begin spraying whipped cream on his head. Takashi Sasaki would come in and go to run the ropes, but the blind Karate Brahman, with whipped cream still all over his face, would end up being in the way, as one of the Brahman brothers would end up shoving Sasaki face first into the whipped cream face of Karate Brahman. The Brahmins then would end up spraying Sasaki's crotch with whipped cream and shoving Karate Brahman's face in it. And then Karate Brahman would end up climbing up to the top and get caught by Takaiwa, who would be nice enough to just let Karate Brahman just exit out of the ring, just get out of the situation, no harm, no foul. Sasaki would end up coming in with Masuda holding him, as one of the Brahman brothers would end up throwing powder, and Sasaki would end up moving out of the way, and the powder would end up getting in Masuda's face instead. All the wrestlers would end up fighting over the bucket of powder, and it would end up getting all over the place and getting all over them, and they would end up just throwing it all at one another. The Brahman brothers would then end up grabbing different bottles of dye, but it would end up getting taken from them and spit in their face. So multiple colors of dye have been shot in their face, followed by Karate Brahman getting all three dyes shot in his face, and then Sasaki would end up hitting a Jintaro super kick and putting Keizo Masuda in a sharpshooter in honor of Jintaro to get the win. So this was pretty much just like a Brahman brother match, just on steroids, with just everything involved, just everything that they do, just thrown in one match. Powder, buckets of water, brawling all over the ring, but again, it was a good match, an entertaining match. Most Brahman brother matches are at least entertaining, and that's what this was. And again, this was a very charitable show, helping Jintaro out, helping him out financially, because again, he's going to be in the hospital for a while due to the severity of the stroke that he suffered.
The Apache Army would hold the finals of their takeover tournament on September 21st in Shinkiba. Can you go over this finals match?
So this show is going to have the semifinals and the finals of the TakeOver the Independent Tournament. The semifinal matches are Tetsuhiro Kuroda defeating Arashi to advance to the finals, and Takeshi Minamino defeating Hiroki to advance. So that's going to lead to Kuroda and Minamino for the finals of the tournament for the WEW title. Minamino, he would end up jumping Kuroda right away, and they would end up fighting in the crowd. Eventually, the Apache Demolition would end up attacking Kuroda out of the ring. Minamino would end up controlling a majority of the match until Kuroda would end up hitting Minamino with the powerbomb and then the Tekken Buster, but the Apache Demolition would pull the referee out of the ring and begin attacking Kuroda, and then try delivering a super powerbomb to him when Kanemura and Arashi would run in to make the save. It would come back down to Kuroda and Minamino, with Kuroda hitting Minamino with the suplex for the win. So Kuroda ends up winning the tournament. Daisaku Shimoda would end up hitting the ring and lifting Kuroda in celebration to end the show. So Kuroda has now won the WEW title once again. This is actually going to be the final Apache Army Shinkiba show for the next 4 years because of how bad they're doing. They are now going to have to downsize, and simply they're just losing too much money running a small building in Shinkiba. That's, like I said, they're just such a small promotion, but they're doing so poorly at this small building that they're going to have to go elsewhere, and they're going to begin working Osaka, where they do pretty well in small buildings like Shinkiba, and they're going to have to relocate regularly to the 01 Dojo when they run Tokyo here in the next couple months.
With Akebono out with pneumonia, Onita would agree to team up with his 064 partners in 01 on October 16th at Corrigan Hall. Can you talk about their match together and what took place afterwards?
So after the Onita-Akebono Exploding Barbed Wire match, Akebono would end up being contracted with pneumonia and stay due to Onita shooting that fireball on his face, which I don't think that's how that works. But anyway, afterwards, Minoru Fujita and Takeya Sugawara would end up meeting up with Onita and telling him, hey, with Akebono out, 064 group can't go on, we need a leader. And they would ask Onita to lead them while Akebono was out. And Onita would end up agreeing to do so they would merge the two groups, and it would end up being called Jado 64. And this would end up leading to a match with Onita teaming up with Takeya Sugawara and Minoru Fujita. And they're going to go up against Shinjiro Otani, Kamikaze, and Yoshikazu Yokoyama in a scramble bunkhouse falls count anywhere street fight death match. Onita here is prime dickish heel, and his smile before the match shows this sense of pride as if he had stolen Akebono's girlfriend, and everyone is now seeing them out in public together. Fujita would end up grabbing the bat first, but eventually they would end up just all brawling around the crowd. Onita would end up smashing Kamikaze's head into the east side of Corrigan before throwing him into the seats and then going up to the bleachers of the north side of Corrigan. Onita would then end up focusing on Yokoyama and bloodying him up and bringing him in the crowd and smash his head into the announcer's table before pile driving him through the announcer's table with the table not breaking at all. Onita would then try another table, and this table would manage to break. Fujita would then end up bringing in the bloody Yokoyama and kicking him low, and Yokoyama would end up eventually coming back and kicking Fujita low before picking up the barbed wire bat and hitting everyone with it. Otani would then place Onita in the corner and do the face scrub running kick, and then Otani would end up delivering a half Nelson suplex to Sugawara, but Onita would make the save by blowing mist in Otani's face. Onita and Sugawara would then end up hitting a DDT on Yokoyama, followed by a Swanton Bomb by Fujita for the win, so the Jado 64 group get the win. Afterwards, Sugawara and Fujita would end up turning on Onita and begin attacking him when Yaguchi would rush in the ring with the barbed wire bat to make the save, as Sugawara would end up getting on the mic and announcing that their real leader was back, and Akebono would end up appearing and challenging Onita to a singles match at the next Corrigan Hall show in November. So they're going to go with Onita and Akebono right away. Akebono had vacated the World Heavyweight title in 01 after contracting the pneumonia, so now he is titleless, and he can now face off against Onita. And now with politics, Akebono beat him, but he was the champion at the time, and this can set up a Onita getting his way kind of match, or getting his revenge type match here going forward that we'll go over here in a little while.
Freedoms would then run a show on October 24th in Shinkiba, with the Freedoms Army facing off against Unchained, which would include a new member of the group. Can you go over this main event match on the show?
So they would announce a crowd of 229 fans for this show, which is great compared to what they have been doing for Shinkiba. The only explanation I have is that Jun Kasai is back in the mix, and fans really want to see him in the main event. And so on this show, he's going to team up with the newest member of Unchained, Minoru Fujita, and they're going to go up against Takashi Sasaki and Kamui. And in this match, it would be a slow start. Eventually, they would end up picking up at the end, as Kasai would end up smashing a chair over Kamui's head and then trying to hit him with a clothesline, but Kamui would end up delivering a clothesline to Kasai instead, and then placing a chair over Fujita's head and hitting a mammoth home run on him, with Kasai having to make the save. And then Kamui would end up trying for a moonsault, but Fujita would move out of the way and Kamui would have to land on his feet, but Fujita would then roll Kamui up with a Law Magistral for the win. So really nothing too much of a match. Afterwards, Takashi Sasaki and Minoru Fujita Fujita, they would end up getting in a shoving fight with Kamui having to rush in and begin fighting Fujita, as Takeda would end up coming over and helping his Unchained partner by attacking Kamui before the ring would just end up being cleared and a match would be made for the next Shinkiba show with Kamui taking on Fujita. So Hama pretty much is out at this point, and Minoru Fujita is taking his spot in Unchained, and going forward, Unchained is going to consist of Jun Kasai, Masashi Takeda, Kenji Fukimoto, and Minoru Fujita, and like I said, Hama at this point is out. He would actually never end up coming back to Freedoms.
Abdullah Kobayashi would defend the Big Japan Deathmatch title against Yuko Miyamoto on October 29th at Corrigan Hall in a scaffold deathmatch. Can you go over what took place in this match?
So this is going to be a scaffold light tubes death match. It's a callback to Miyamoto and his match against Takashi Sasaki back in 2007. That was a scaffold match that made Yuko Miyamoto a star. So they're going to try and get Kobayashi some rub here, with using Miyamoto's match. They would start off by going into the light tubes together, and eventually they would end up going to the outside where Miyamoto would throw Kobayashi in the crowd. They would end up getting back in the ring and take turns headbutting light tubes into one another, with Kobayashi chewing on some of the glass afterwards. They would both agree to go up the scaffold, with Kobayashi knocking Miyamoto off of it, and then Kobayashi would try to dive off the scaffold, but Miyamoto would end up moving out of the way. Miyamoto would then send Kobayashi in the corner, but his bad knee would go out, and which would cause him to just collapse before he would even hit the turnbuckle. Miyamoto would end up going for a moonsault eventually, but Kobayashi would end up getting under him and hitting a power bomb, and then sending Miyamoto into the ropes, with Miyamoto coming back and hitting a handspring elbow. Miyamoto would then end up hitting an oppressive-looking Fire Thunder on a stack of light tubes, with Kobayashi still kicking out. Miyamoto would then climb up the scaffold and hit a moonsault on Kobayashi, with Kobayashi still kicking out and coming back to hit Miyamoto with a backhand. They would both agree to climb up the scaffold once again, with Kobayashi hitting a pile driver on Miyamoto on the scaffold, and then slamming Miyamoto off of it, and then hitting an elbow drop off the scaffold for the win. So Big Japan's giving Kobayashi the entire year here with wins to try and give him a chance at winning an MVP or Wrestler of the Year award from all these different companies, that give awards out. They want Kobayashi to get his credit for having these matches, trying to get... so they're going to have him in these type of matches that are like, hey, what kind of match can we have him against? Hey, Miyamoto in a scaffold match, that's going to be a great match. That will help him get votes. So that's really the reason they're all just completely focusing on Kobayashi to be their star here. And Kobayashi is good. I don't want to take anything away from him, especially what he's put his body through. But, there's still, young stars like Miyamoto and Masashi Takeda and Asami Kodaka that are light years better as far as workers. But, again, Big Japan is always going to love Kobayashi, and they're always going to love Ryuji Ito. Those are their guys. Those are their boys. And, they earned that, their spots by going through, putting their body through so much. So again, no credit taken away from them. But at this point, they're nowhere near the workers that some of these younger wrestlers are.
Kanemura would make his full return to the ring on November 3rd in Osaka for the Apache Army, as he would challenge for the WEW Tag Team titles in a barbed wire board death match. What ended up happening in this match?
Yeah, so this is going to be Kanemura's first match back in 3 months since his injury. He's going to team up with Magnitude Kishiwada to take on Tomohiko Hashimoto and Shoshi Ichimaya, the WEW Tag Team Champions. In this match, Kanemura and Hashimoto, they would start off with a dueling chair spot, with Hashimoto getting the better end of it right away. Hashimoto would end up taking Kanemura out of the ring, as Hazard would hit Kanemura over the head with a cane, and then Hashimoto would bring Kanemura back in the ring and throw him into one of the barbed wire boards. Both Hashimoto and Ichimaya would focus on Kanemura, when Hasegawa would end up hitting the ring and delivering a spinning heel kick to Ichimaya, but Hazard would smash Kanemura over the back with a cane, and Hashimoto would end up tossing Kanemura into Ichimaya, who would squash Hasegawa into the other barbed wire board. Hashimoto would then lay the barbed wire board over Kanemura along with some chairs, as Ichimaya would end up hitting a senton on Kanemura to get the win to defend the WEW Tag Team title. So the Apache Demolition once again defeat the Apache Army on Kanemura's return night. Again, this is just kind of where the Apache Army promotion is at this point, and like I mentioned, they're going to have to downsize here going forward.
Atsushi Onita and Akebono would meet again in a singles match on November 6th at Corrigan Hall for 0-1. Can you talk about what ended up happening during this match?
So this is going to be a lumberjack death match to hide the limitability of both Onita and Akebono. They would start by posing face-to-face before the introductions, with Akebono shoving Onita down, and then Akebono would get on the mic and tell 064 to leave, as he did not need any help beating Onita. Akebono would then end up putting his arms behind his back, as Onita would punch and slap him with strikes, doing nothing to Akebono, before he would strike Onita and throw him into the corner and splash him, and then drop an elbow, with Onita managing to kick out. Yaguchi would end up hitting Akebono from behind with a barbed wire bat, with Akebono throwing Yaguchi in the ring, and then Akebono would end up splashing him with the barbed wire bat over Yaguchi, which would be a mistake, as Akebono would end up injuring himself and exiting out of the ring, as the Jado Army would then attack Akebono and throw him back in the ring, with Onita waiting with the barbed wire bat to smash Akebono with it. Hosaka would then end up getting on the apron, and Akebono would charge at him, but Hosaka would move out of the way, and Akebono would end up turning around and getting red mist spit in his face by Onita, followed by a DDT, and then a DDT on the barbed wire bat for the win, and a surprise finish with Onita getting his win back. Onita would begin choking Akebono with the barbed wire bat when 064 would come out to make the save. Afterwards, Onita would end up hitting 01 President Nakamura with the barbed wire bat for good measure before leaving. So like I mentioned earlier, Onita wanted his win back. Akebono's not the champion anymore, so there's no reason for him to beat Onita here, and this just continues the feud, but now it's 1-1, and it's going to set up another big match in Yokohama with Onita taking on Akebono in February 2013.
Freedoms would then run at Shinkiba on December 4th with a special main event of Kamui taking on Minoru Fujita. Can you go over this match and the scary spot that ended up happening?
So they would announce a crowd of 125 fans, which is back down to one of the lowest numbers they've ever had at Shinkiba, and the only guess that can have is the fact that the main event is Minoru Fujita versus Kamui, and I'm guessing it's just those two guys against each other is just not a main event for the Freedoms fans at this point. On this show, Great Kajika would team up with his new partner, Gabai Chichon, and they're going to take on the Brahmin Brothers. Gabai would be someone in an old man mask portraying someone that's in his 80s as he walks around very slowly with a walking cane. I was once told it was the Kaintai Dojo wrestler Psycho under the mask, but I've never heard that as a fact or anything. The match would start with Gabai and one of the Brahmin Brothers doing very slow chain wrestling before Gabai would end up using his cane to trip the Brahmin Brother, and then Gabai would try to slam him before his back would end up giving out. The Brahmin Brother would then end up throwing Gabai into the ropes, and Gabai would walk very slowly towards it before falling down. Gabai would end up tagging in the very young sprite Kajika in comparison, and he would end up facing off against the Brahmin Brothers, with the Brahmin Brothers placing a street sign and smashing it with the cane. Kajika would end up fighting back and knocking both Brahmin Brothers down, as he would end up tagging back in Gabai, who would come in and give very soft chops to the Brahmin Brother, with the Brahmin Brother kicking Gabai's cane and making him fall down, and then suplexing Gabai and pinning him, but Gabai would manage to use his walking cane to reach the ropes to break the count. Gabai would then end up climbing up to the top, and the Brahmin Brother would just end up looking on as he would end up grabbing the Brahmin Brother by his arm and doing the walking cane rope walk like Jinsei Shinsaki, before the other Brahmin Brother would end up pulling his cane, causing him to fall down to the mat. The Brahmins would then end up tossing Gabai into the ropes as he would again walk very slowly before picking up his speed and delivering a Hurricane Rana and sending them both outside the ring, as he would end up jumping onto the top rope and diving onto both of them on the outside. So this is the other side of the Gabai gimmick, where 90% of the match he's portraying this old man that can barely walk, and then all of a sudden there's this flash where he becomes this high-flying wrestler and he can do all these moves like jumping on the top rope and diving on the outside. Eventually the Brahmin Brothers, they would end up throwing salt in Gabai's eyes and then grabbing a hold of him, as the other one would end up trying to hit him with the stop sign, but Gabai would move out of the way, and then Gabai would end up delivering a Gabai bomb for the win. So Gabai and Kajika end up getting the win over the Brahmin Brothers. So this is a really fun gimmick. I really like this. It's unique, and he still wrestles in the independent scene, the very small independent scene, so he doesn't wrestle in Freedoms anymore, which is a shame because I wish more people got to see him. Like I said, this is a really creative gimmick where, hey, 90% of the time he's just this old man in a comedy gimmick, and then all of a sudden he becomes this high flyer out of nowhere. So Gabai's going to be around here for a couple months going forward as Great Kajika's partner in Freedoms. And then the main event's going to be Kamui taking on Minoru Fujita in a hardcore match. Kamui would end up jumping Fujita right away and tossing him into the crowd. And then Kamui would end up getting on the apron and delivering a flip onto Fujita before removing the mat around ringside. But as Kamui would end up attempting to suplex Fujita off the apron, Takeda would end up appearing and attacking Kamui, leading to Fujita grabbing Kamui and taking him outside Shinkiba. Fujita would end up coming back in, but the garage door would open to Shinkiba, and Kamui would end up driving in the building and softly hitting Fujita with his vehicle. Kamui would end up driving up to the ringside and climbing up to the roof of his vehicle, as Takeda would end up throwing a chair at Kamui, which would allow Fujita to climb up the top of the vehicle as well, but Kamui would end up knocking Vegeta off and delivering a moonsault off his vehicle onto the outside. They would end up getting back in the ring and begin exchanging strikes with one another, with Kamui hitting a fireman's carry and then going back up to the top of his vehicle and placing a ladder on top of it and then climbing up to the top of the ladder, and he would try to do a swanton bomb, but oh shit, he would end up tripping and end up hitting the ropes and falling back outside the ring in what would be a very dangerous, scary looking spot, although you know Kamui's dying inside after screwing this spot up. It looked really bad. Kamui would end up trying to get up and save the horribleness of that last spot and laying chairs on Fujita and hitting a swanton bomb, but the crowd's dead. Like, that took the air out of the building after Kamui screwed up. Kasai would end up showing up and pulling the referee out of the ring as Kamui would make the pinfall on Fujita. This would allow Fujita to take advantage and lay Kamui out with a kick to the head, and then Fujita would end up hitting a tombstone piledriver on Kamui, but Kamui would manage to kick out and try for a Pele kick, but Fujita would manage to move out of the way and then hit Kamui with the Sasuke Damashi Segway, which is Vegeta's finishing move, for the win. So this match was pretty much the definition of Kamui going all out, trying for something awesome, and he's done it before, screwing up big time. Like I said, a very scary spot. It's unfortunate this spot did not work, but thankfully Kamui wasn't injured and just his pride was hurt instead. But again, not too many people know about this spot, but first time seeing it, I was like, oh my goodness, I can't believe that happened. But thankfully, like I said, Kamui's okay, and this would be the last time that Kamui would try a ladder on a car spot, but he was channeling the old Masada match that he had 2 years ago, knowing how popular that match was, where, you know, they're powerbombing one another on his car, so he wanted to, you know, use his vehicle again as a prop here, and it went completely wrong.
Onita and Tiger Mask would have a rematch on December 7th at Corrigan Hall. Can you go over the match and what happened afterwards?
So Onita's going to get another shot here at the original Tiger Mask, Satoru Sayama. Before the match, Masashi Yayagi, Onita's longtime rival back in 1989, they main evented the first FMW show together, and Kuniaki Kobayashi, Sayama's longtime rival in New Japan, they would come to ringside and watch the match at a table, with Onita being really upset at Kobayashi's presence, as he would begin throwing water at him and giving him the double bird. The match would start with Onita tossing Sayama out of the ring, and Yuguchi and the other Jado Army members would begin attacking him with a barbed wire bat, and then Onita would spit red mist in Sayama's eyes outside the ring. Onita would then work on Sayama before accidentally slipping out of the ring, and the Tiger Mask crew would begin attacking Onita as the Jado Army would come over and begin brawling with them. They would end up getting back in the ring with Sayama picking Onita up and hitting a tombstone pile driver, and then hitting Onita with the barbed wire bat, and then Sayama would begin climbing up the top when Yuguchi would hit him with the barbed wire bat, causing Kobayashi to hit the ring and attack Onita with the chair. Yagi would end up hitting the ring then and hitting a spinning heel kick on Kobayashi as Onita would spit red mist in Kobayashi's face, and then Sayama would end up hitting Onita with the barbed wire bat, causing the referee to just throw the match out and rule it a no contest, with the fans booing this result. This was not a main event, so they planned this. They knew the screwjob ending wasn't going to go over well, so they put this in the undercard, or the mid-card at least, and not main event the show. Afterwards, the Jado Army would hit the ring and begin attacking Sayama again, with the Tiger Mask group coming in, and they would clear the ring. Sayama would lay some kicks to Onita on the apron as Onita would take off with nobody. Onita, Sayama, the fans, me, happy after this match. Afterwards, backstage, Kobayashi would go after Onita, with the two having to be separated. So this is going to set up a match in January where Onita and Ayagi are going to team up, the longtime rivals, against Sayama and Kuniaki Kobayashi, the longtime rivals in New Japan. So it's kind of this FMW versus New Japan feud here, in a very nostalgic way with very old wrestlers. And, like I said, this feud is working as far as the fans' interest. They care about it, but politics and everything kind of screwed this match up, as Onita wasn't going to lose to Sayama in a singles match, and Sayama's already going, I've already lost to you in a tag match, Onita, that's enough, I'm not losing to you again. And so they want to continue this feud, but there's just too much politics involved, and as a result, now we're going to throw in, Ayagi and Kobayashi, and one of them can do a job on a future show. Onita and Sayama as a singles match, it's done because of politics and just nobody wanting a job more than they already have.
Atsushi Onita would appear for Noah for the first time on December 9th at Sumo Hall, as the Jado Army would face off against the No Mercy group. Can you go over what took place in this match?
Yeah, so the Jado Army of Onita, Yaguchi, and Hideki Osaka are going to take on the No Mercy team of Kenta, Yoshihiro Takayama, and Maibach Taniguchi. Onita and Kenta, they would begin brawling around ringside before making it back in the ring, where Kenta would get Onita in the corner and begin laying kicks to him, with Yaguchi making the save, and Onita would end up laying Kenta out with a chair shot to the head, and then Onita would end up pile driving Kenta through a table. Onita would then try to hit Kenta with a barbed wire bat, but he would end up hitting Yaguchi with it instead, and then Takayama would come in and pick Onita up to the top like he was going to choke slam Onita, but Onita would end up spitting green mist in Takayama's face and begin smashing everyone with the broken table piece until Kenta would fight back and pick Onita up to try and hit him with the go to sleep, but Osaka would manage to make the save and hit a Death Valley bomb on Kenta. Osaka then would end up charging at Kenta, but he would end up being met with a clothesline and then a kick to the head and then the go to sleep for the win. So No Mercy picks up the win, but right afterwards Onita would end up spitting red mist in Kenta's face, and then Kanemura, who had accompanied the Jado Army, would hit the ring and begin hitting Kenta with the barbed wire bat, as the Jado Army and No Mercy groups would all hit the ring and brawl. So this is going to be another feud that Onita's going to have. He's already got the Sayama feud, he's already got the Akebono feud. Well, now he's going to feud with Kenta and No Mercy in Noah, as, like I said, Onita's hot, he's a hot property, and bigger promotions are now interested in him in hopes of getting bigger shows that they're running to draw better, because Onita's going to bring in a certain fan base that these promotions would not get otherwise.
Big Japan would run on December 9th at the Yokohama Bunka Gym. Can you go over the strong heavyweight and deathmatch title matches that took place on this show?
So on this show, Yoshihiro Sasaki, he's going to defend the Big Japan Strong Heavyweight title against Ryota Hama, a former All Japan Triple Crown champion, although most would consider that title reign a disappointment. At this point, Hama is kind of bouncing around between All Japan and Big Japan. He's a All Japan wrestler at this point, but he would eventually become a full-time Big Japan wrestler. They would start off with Hama overpowering Sasaki and taking him to the outside and running right into Sasaki into the corner on the outside. They would end up getting back in the ring, and Sasaki would try to sunset flip Hama, but Hama would just end up sitting on Yoshihito instead. Hama would then try to hit a Vader bomb on Sasaki, but Sasaki would get up and try his best to deliver a power bomb off the top turnbuckle, and then begin delivering brutal headbutts to Hama before hitting a lariat to get the win. So Yoshihito defends the Big Japan Strong Heavyweight title against a former All Japan Triple Crown champion. Afterwards, another All Japan wrestler, Manabu Soya, he would end up coming to the ring and challenging Yoshihito for the title in 2013. And then the main event's going to be Abdullah Kobayashi defending the Big Japan Deathmatch title against Ryuji Ito. This is going to be the third year in a row that Kobayashi and Ito are facing off in the main event of the December Yokohama Bunka Gym show. This is going to be a light tubes, concrete blocks, spike nails, Kinzon, barbed wire board deathmatch. Ito would come to the ring bringing a syringe-looking light tube, and they would start off by taking it outside the ring early, with Ito trying to hit Kobayashi with a concrete block, but missing and breaking it across the turnbuckle instead. They would end up getting back in the ring with Kobayashi throwing Ito into a barbed wire board, and then would begin breaking light tubes over Ito's head. Kobayashi would then end up picking up the syringe light tube, but Ito would end up kicking it and breaking it across Kobayashi, and then Ito would stick a Kinzon in Kobayashi's head, and then grab the syringes and place them both in Kobayashi's mouth. So Kobayashi would have two syringes stuck in his mouth and a Kinzon stuck in his head, as Ito would end up hitting a Shining Wizard, and then Ito would try to suplex Kobayashi, but Kobayashi would grab the syringes out of his mouth and stab Ito's hand hands with them. Ito would eventually end up picking a concrete block up and hitting Kobayashi over the head with it, and then slamming Kobayashi on spike nails, and then placing the spike nails over him and hitting a dragon splash, sending the nails into Kobayashi, but Kobayashi would still manage to just kind of shove Ito off. Kobayashi would get up and deliver a powerbomb to Ito onto the spike nails, and then place the spike nails over Ito and hit an elbow drop on him, with Ito still managing to kick out. Kobayashi would then end up hitting a horrible looking pile driver onto the spike nails, and then picking up a tube of light tubes and hitting an elbow drop on Ito to finally get the win. So Kobayashi defends the Big Japan Deathmatch title, defeating Ito once again, 1 year after originally winning the title from Ito. This match was okay. There was more emphasis on the weapons than the light tubes, like the previous matches, so that's a good thing. But the structure of the match is just pretty much the same as the other two, as these two are just always going to work pretty much the same with one another. And again, it's a good match. It's just kind of, but it's, even with the different weapons and not using as many light tubes, again, it's still just kind of the same. Ito and Kobayashi, they're just always going to have the same match no matter what is used in the match.
Atsushi Onita and Masada Tanaka would team up on December 13th for the first round of the 0-1 Tag Team Tournament. Can you go over their match and how far they made it in the tournament?
So this is going to be a scramble bunkhouse street fight deathmatch for Team Atsushi Onita and Masada Tanaka going up against Akebono and Takuya Sugawara. Sugawara would run to the ring before anyone else would to try and grab the barbed wire bat, but Tanaka would chase after him and grab his leg. While that's going on, Onita and Akebono, they're brawling in the crowd before Onita would make it in the ring and set up a table and end up pile driving Sugawara through that table. Onita would end up using a broken piece of the table and smash it over Akebono's head. Onita would then go to powerbomb Sugawara when Akebono would grab Onita and lift him up, and he would end up being met in the face once again with red mist by Onita, followed by Tanaka hitting a clothesline, and then Onita would end up hitting a Thunderfire powerbomb on Sugawara for the win. But Onita and Tanaka would end up losing the next night to Shinjiro Otani and Tetsuhito Takiiwa when Onita would end up getting counted out, so Onita and Tanaka would not end up advancing past the second round in this tournament.
The Apache Army would run their last show of the year on December 22nd at the 0-1 Dojo. Can you go over the main event and the current status of the promotion at this point?
So I mentioned earlier how the Apache Army was downsizing. They were no longer able to run Shinkiba due to financial issues, and now they're going to run at the 0-1 Dojo, a very small little building. They would announce 100 fans for this show, but it did not look like really 100 fans were here. Kanemura, Kuroda, and Arashi, they would team up to take on Tomohiko Hashimoto, Shoshi Ichimaya, and Gabriel Wolf, an Australian wrestler for the PCW promotion. Hazard would end up interfering early on, allowing Gabriel Wolf to hit a spinning heel kick and then a perfect plex to Kanemura, but eventually Kanemura would end up blocking a strike of Wolf and rolling Wolf up with an inside cradle for the win. So this was just highlights that I was able to see and really nothing of a match, but the Apache Army is looking not too well when they run Tokyo, running in such a small building like the 0-1 Dojo at this point.
Mr. Pogo's WWS promotion would run a show in Gunma on December 23rd with Pogo facing off against Onita in a tag match. Can you talk about what happened here?
So the main event here is going to be Mr. Pogo teaming up with Great Pogo, who is Hiroshi Shimada, a former Wing wrestler, and Naoya Takase, a WWS wrestler. They're going to take on Atsushi Onita, Masayoshi Motegi, and Katsunari Toye in a scramble bunkhouse street fight death match. Pogo and Onita, they would go through their best of spots here, as Pogo would hit Onita with a barbed wire bat and then use his sickle before kind of blowing a fireball at Toye, but completely missing it, really, despite Toye selling it. Onita would hit a Fire Thunder powerbomb on Takase and then cover him, with Takase managing to kick out, and then Pogo would throw Toye over the top rope with his chain and choke him out for the Pogo team win. Somewhere in here, Onita would spit Pogo with green mist, as well as his face is covered in green mist, but like I said, this was just highlights and really nothing of a match for even based off the highlights that you saw. Just kind of Onita and Pogo just going through the motions of what they were famous for in the 90s.
The final Freedom Show would take place on December 25th for the annual Christmas Deathmatch Show, with Kasai and Takeda taking on two new Mexican deathmatch wrestlers. Can you talk about this show and go over who the Mexican wrestlers were and how they found their way into Freedoms?
So they would announce a crowd of 735 fans, which is the second lowest number for Korakuen Hall for Freedoms, but it was kind of expected since the main event's a tag match, and there were two unknowns in that main event match, and pretty much what happened was Jun Kasai was looking on YouTube, and he found this promotion DTU on YouTube, and he saw that there's a bunch of these Mexican wrestlers doing what we're doing, light tubes, weapons, and stuff like that. And so Kasai would end up reaching out to them and getting in contact with DTU, and which is ran by Crazy Boy, who had wrestled in FMW back around 2000 or so. And they reached out to them about trying to see if they could get these two wrestlers on their Christmas show. And so Violento Jack and Arrow Boy would get booked for this show. So on this show, Mama Sasaki would make his return after being out of action for 6 months. He's going to team up with the Winger, Hiroki, and Ryuji Sekini, and they're going to go up against Hito, Kinji Fukimoto, Captain Normal, and One Man Crew. Captain Normal was Masato Inaba under a mask. He's a Unchained member at this point, even though Inaba's okay in Big Japan, but he is usually god-awful under the mask in Freedoms. In this match, they would end up brawling all over the building with Mammoth and Hito squaring off in the crowd. They would end up going back in the ring where Fukimoto would grab a hold of Mammoth, and Hito would end up trying to swing a barbed wire bat, but Mammoth would move out of the way as Hito would swing at him, and Hito would end up hitting Fukimoto with it instead, and then Mammoth would end up finishing Fukimoto off with the 29 years old on the barbed wire bat for the win. So the Freedoms team gets the win. And then Masato Tanaka would take on Kamui, and in this match, Kamui would end up hitting a tilt-a-whirl on Tanaka very early on, sending him out on the outside, where Kamui would end up going outside, and the two would begin exchanging a dueling chair spot with one another before Tanaka would end up getting the better end of it, and then Tanaka would end up throwing Kamui at the stage of Korakuen Hall, but Kamui would end up jumping on it and delivering a moonsault on Tanaka. Kamui would then end up grabbing a table, but Tanaka would grab Kamui and eventually powerbomb Kamui through that table, and then slam Kamui on the table, with the table only kind of breaking. They would end up getting back in the ring, and Tanaka would just fling a chair right at Kamui's head, and then Tanaka would set up a stack of chairs in the ring and go to suplex Kamui, but Kamui would manage to get under Tanaka and powerbomb him on the stack of chairs, and then deliver a weak-looking Firebird splash on Tanaka. Kamui would then end up charging at Tanaka, but he would end up getting met with an elbow, and then Tanaka would smash a chair over Kamui's head and hit him with the sliding D for the win. So this was probably a big deal to Kamui, growing up as an FMW fan, so I'm sure he was just thrilled to get to face off against Tanaka. And then the main event's going to be Jun Kasai and Masashi Takeda taking on Violento Jack and Arrow Boy in a no-canvas, light tubes, glass board death match. So they're doing the no-canvas ring match again, where they take the ring mat out and just wrestle on the hardwood. This match would start with Jack and Arrow charging at Kasai and Takeda right at the start and throwing Kasai into the light tubes set up in the ropes, with Kasai heading out of the ring. And then they would end up picking up Takeda, with Arrow Boy coming off the top, landing on Takeda, and Takeda would end up exiting out of the ring to try and regroup. Both Jack and Arrow Boy would end up diving over the top on both of them outside the ring. They would end up getting back in the ring with Arrow Boy delivering a dropkick, sending Takeda into the first glass board in the corner, and then Jack would then bring a razor cross board in the ring and powerbomb Kasai onto it. Jack would then end up shoving Kasai's forehead into the razor and cut him open, and then Kasai and Takeda would try and fight back, as Takeda would end up hitting an Olympic slam on Jack on a ladder, while Kasai would throw Arrow Boy in the crowd. But as Kasai would end up climbing up the ladder to try and do a Pearl Harbor splash, he would be met by Jack, who would suplex Kasai off the ladder on the hardwood ring. Jack would then end up placing the ladder over his head, begin hitting Kasai and Takeda with it, when Takeda would end up grabbing Jack and delivering a German suplex to him with the ladder still over his head, and then Takeda would end up putting Arrow Boy in the ankle lock, with Jack's solution to breaking the move just picking up the referee and delivering a package pile driver to him. Nikon Lee would end up coming in the ring and having to take over as the referee, as Kasai and Takeda would begin taking apart the ring and leaving a hole in it, as Takeda would end up going to the outside with a light tube in his hands, when Arrow Boy would get up and deliver a dive over the top, breaking the light tube that Takeda was holding in an awesome looking spot, as Jack would end up hitting a package pile driver through the hole of the ring, sending Kasai under the ring. Arrow Boy would end up taking the other glass board and placing it on a set of chairs over Takeda and climb up to the top, but Takeda would get up and suplex Arrow Boy through the other glass board and would end up making the pin attempt on Arrow Boy, when Nikon Lee awkwardly stopping before hitting 3, as it would be apparent that Jack was late trying to make the save here. Jack would then end up placing a stack of light tubes over Takeda and delivering a dive off the top, with Takeda kicking out, which would end up really upsetting Jack, who had set up like he was going to package pile drive Nikon Lee through the hole in the ring, when Kasai would end up making the save by spearing Jack into the hole, and then Kasai would end up finishing Arrow Boy with a reverse Tiger Driver on the hardwood for the win. Afterwards, Kasai and Takeda, they would show respect to Jack and Arrow afterwards with fist bumps, as Kasai would end up inviting them back after their performance. This was an awesome match to end the year for Freedoms. One of my favorite Freedoms matches ever. Even there was that one screwed up spot where Jack was late trying to make the save, but other than that, an awesome match. Violento Jack and Arrow Boy were incredible here, and at least Violento Jack would end up becoming a regular with Freedoms as a result, because of how awesome he was in this match. I think Arrow Boy just didn't want to travel to Japan as much as Jack has, and I mean, at this point, Jack's a regular in Freedoms, living in Japan now. Jack would eventually just end up taking Masada's spot, because Masada would actually never end up getting booked by Freedoms. I feel like after that Kasai match in August, they kind of were, well, we have nothing really for him, so essentially Jack would take over his spot as the top big foreigner to feud with Kasai going forward. But like I said, this was an incredible match. It was a breath of fresh air. I can't say enough how incredible and how awesome this match was.
All right, Brett, can you go over where everybody can find you at?
You can find my website at bahufmw.com, where I have news, results, biographies. I also have all the history of FMW videos and music videos on my website as well. You can find my Instagram at bahufmw world, where I go through all the Japanese wrestling magazines that I have and find really cool, interesting FMW pictures or anything related to FMW. You can find me on Twitter at bahufmw, where I go over any news or anything that's reported. I also will publish every so often a 1-minute video of this date in history of an FMW show with 1-minute clips of what happened. And then you can find my YouTube at Brett FMW, where I have re-uploaded every past episode back up to YouTube. I've had some issues with YouTube here the last couple months, but I believe this account should stay up here for a long time with no issues. If you are just listening to this, just know that you can watch these videos on YouTube, where everything we're talking about, I have clips exactly showing what exactly I'm talking about. So just YouTube search Brett FMW, you should find my account. If you are just watching this on YouTube, though, just know as well that you can just listen to these on your phone if you want to. I have restarted back up the podcast and re-uploaded every history of FMW back up to Anchor, which as a result links to iTunes and Spotify, so you can listen to these on your phone if you want to. If you don't want to just sit by the computer, you can just listen to them on your phone instead. And then also you can find my Facebook group, History of FMW. I have all the History of FMW videos is there as well, and those videos should never come down. Those should always stay up. But also you can interact with other fans of the show or just fans of Japanese wrestling in general. I will post FMW or FMW related clips every so often. Like I said, you can post whatever you want in regards to FMW or just interact with other people. It's a really cool group, and everyone that is a part of it that's given me any feedback really enjoy it and talk very positively of it. So give it a try and check us out. And that's pretty much it.
Thanks again for joining us, everybody. We will be back for episode 41, where we will be covering everything that happened for the eventful year of 2013. See you then.